You appreciate you tuning into McElroy and Cubelic in the morning here on Jocks 94.5. Cole and Greg out today. They will be back in here tomorrow. So today it is myself, Conrad Van Order, alongside Damian Mitchell and John Saber here with you for the next 3 hours, breaking down everything from a big weekend across the sports world, from everything from the NFL draft, Major League Baseball. We had the first overtime game in the history of the UFL right here at Protective Stadium between the Birmingham Stallions and the Memphis Showboats on Friday. I know it was Talladega. A lot of you probably out there with plenty of stories to share, I would hope, from a fun weekend at Talladega. So much for us to get into here on this Monday morning. But we do have the NFL draft, probably the big conversation, the big topic of conversation from over the weekend. Of course, we had the first round on Thursday night, gave a lot of reaction to that on Friday before getting you set up for rounds 2 and 3, which you had on Friday. And then on Saturday, you had rounds 4 through 7. So quickly, we will just give you a little bit of a recap if you missed anything that happened over the weekend. So the final tallies for both Alabama and Auburn are in. You had 7 Alabama players selected there in the 2025 NFL draft. You had 3 players from Auburn. So for the Auburn front, you had Jarquez Hunter. He was the first player off the board there in the 4th round. He went to the Los Angeles Rams. And then shortly after that, you had Keandre Lambert-Smith. He was drafted also to Los Angeles. He will go to the Chargers, though. And then you had Jalen McLeod, the edge rusher from the Auburn Tigers as well. He was selected by the Jacksonville Jaguars in the 6th round, I do believe there. And so you had, those are your 3 guys for Auburn that were selected over the weekend. And then you had 7 guys for Alabama. So, of course, you had Tyler Booker, as well as Jahad Campbell there that went in the 1st round of the NFL draft back on Thursday. The next player off the board was, in fact, Jalen Milroe, the Alabama quarterback who went in the 3rd round. He was taken by the Seattle Seahawks with the 92nd overall pick. So, of course, the early joke going around is that Alabama simply had a little transaction this offseason where they traded their former quarterback, Jalen Milroe, to the Seattle Seahawks. In exchange, they got Ryan Grubb. So certainly a trade I think a lot of Alabama fans are happy with right now. But Jalen Milroe, he went off the board there to the Seattle Seahawks. You also had Malachi Moore, who went to the New York Jets in the 4th round. You had Q Robinson, who went to the Denver Broncos. Robbie Oots joined Jalen Milroe there on the Seattle Seahawks. You had Tim Smith with the Indianapolis Colts. So a productive weekend there for both Alabama and Auburn as far as the NFL draft is concerned. But outside of that, Damian, you did have the big story, which was Shadur Sanders, who did not get selected in the 1st round of the NFL draft. We thought, okay, surely he's going to get picked in the 2nd round. If not, okay, maybe he falls to the 3rd round, but he's not going to make it out of Friday. And in fact, he did, and he ultimately wasn't selected until Saturday in the 5th round of the NFL draft by the Cleveland Browns. So those were the big storylines kind of over the weekend from the draft. Again, Alabama and Auburn, 10 total selections from both of those schools combined, 7 for Bama, 3 for Auburn, and then the Shadur Sanders drama with him not being selected ultimately until the 5th round by the Cleveland Browns. And he was the second quarterback that the Browns drafted, as they took Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round before getting Sanders in the 5th round.
Yeah, and one, I will attest to this. I do think the pickup for the Los Angeles Rams getting Jarquez Hunter when they got him is great value because, one, he already doesn't have enough tread on the tires because of just his talent. And that's kind of where I think Sean McVay, you already have Kyron Williams. You got an aging Matthew Stafford. You got Puka Nacua. You lose Cooper Kupp. And you're adding, just value pieces. When I looked at the draft overall, I think the only team I really just still have a question mark is the Pittsburgh Steelers because you address other positions that maybe garner, you get a lot of depth out of, but the most important position you still have question marks, and that's the quarterback position.
No, they got the national championship winner in the 6th round.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
It's a fact. But
yeah. He's a winner.
Yeah,
at
Ohio State, 1,000%. But I just think that you still have some question marks at the quarterback position. But I think that overall, both Alabama and Auburn being represented in the draft, it was great. But yeah, the big question mark is, again, how does Shadur Sanders fall from being, top 3, top 4 quarterback in the draft to the 5th round. Like, it's still just puzzles me because, again, it starts at, you excuse me. People were telling us, from everybody was saying like Tyler Shough, there's going to be a team that falls in love with Tyler Shough. And it was the New Orleans Saints. And you get him in the 2nd round, and he was kind of the guy that was starting to just kind of him and Jackson Dart were starting to push up. And you're like, okay, well, maybe Shadur falls to the 2nd, 3rd round. I was not expecting him to be there Saturday. And really and truly, just being down in New Orleans, this weekend, a lot of New Orleans Saints fans were like, who is Tyler Shough? Like, what did he do in college? I'm like, okay, he was pretty good when he was in Louisville. I don't necessarily think he's a world beater, but I mean, if you develop him right, like, you think that the team, like, they could rally behind him. But then they started looking at their quarterback room, and then me as a Titans fan talking to people about the quarterback room, I'm just like, oh, we're a lot similar than I thought. Like, yeah, when the whole room stinks, it's hard to find that diamond in the rough. But I think that for Shadur Sanders, one, again, that Cleveland Browns quarterback room is just a collection of guys that nobody really feels like you don't have 100% confidence in. Yeah, Joe Flacco's won a Super Bowl, but that was almost 2 decades ago. It feels like it was forever ago. But then you have Kenny Pickett, who just, backed up Jalen Hurts, last year in the Super Bowl. Deshaun Watson, you got to pay him a boatload of money that he's not going to be playing for you. And then Dylan Gabriel, who's played a ton of college football, been at three stops. And then Shadur Sanders. It's, okay, so where do you want this team to be? Like, is it now just, all right, we're going to have just a slew of talent here and we'll just figure it out? The AFC North is tough. Like, you've got to deal with Baltimore and Lamar Jackson. You've got to deal with Cincinnati and Joe Burrow. The Pittsburgh Steelers, outside of quarterback, they're still Mike Tomlin leading that organization. So, if you're the Cleveland Browns, it's, okay, what exactly are we preparing? Like, what future are we preparing for? Because you've kind of handcuffed yourself with Myles Garrett. But, again, it's not that long ago we just saw Baker Mayfield take this team from the absolute depths in the basement, like the absolute bottom, to the playoffs. And then it's, okay, well, then Joe Flacco comes in and has to play, spot starter here and there, and he leads you to a pretty good record. And, I don't know where they are in the realm of things. And then they still took the flyer and Shadur Sanders in the 5th round.
I liked what the Browns did personally, because I think for them, right, you're in a situation where the value that you got on Shadur Sanders taking him in the 5th round was so high. Like, he was by far and away the highest graded player left on the board at that point, right? And so you now have a situation with him and Dylan Gabriel where you just let them compete, and now you've increased your chances of one of these guys potentially being a franchise quarterback. You've doubled your odds, right? Because now you have 2 guys in there that are going to have an opportunity to win that job. And that was my thing with Shadur as he kept falling was, is at what point is somebody just going to say he's the best player available by a wide margin? I'm just going to take a chance on him, because what if you got a franchise caliber quarterback with a 3rd or 4th round pick? Just from a trade value aspect, how valuable would that be for a franchise? But any team like the Browns or even the Saints, like, if you took Tyler Shough in the 2nd round, okay, turn around in the 4th round, take Shadur, right? Double your odds of getting this franchise quarterback that you've looked for so long and you haven't been able to find. So I really liked what Cleveland did there, right? Because at that point, you're taking a chance and you're saying, okay, are we better off getting some developmental, an offensive tackle in the 5th round that maybe develops into a 2nd string offensive lineman for the next 8 years for us? Or do we go out and use it on a guy that a lot of people had graded as a franchise caliber quarterback, and we let him come in here and compete? On top of the fact, I will say this for Shadur, I think that what happened with this circumstance is maybe one of the best things that could have happened to him, because now he has a chip on his shoulder, right? And now this is where, for a guy like Shadur, you can see how much of it is okay, do you feel disrespected? And that's going to pay off with the amount of work and your work ethic that you're now going to show at the professional level. But it's a very fascinating situation there. But again, I think the Browns did make a smart play by taking Shadur in the 5th round. It was just, I couldn't believe that he fell so far, because again, this was a guy that at the beginning of the draft process, we were thinking was maybe going to be the number 2 overall pick after Cam Ward. And then he was available in round 5.
We saw this 13 years ago, didn't we? Washington, then Redskins took RG3, number 2 overall.
And Kirk Cousins.
And then in the 4th round, not the 5th round, 4th round, you can still find some very good value, and if not get starters, maybe at least contributing players. Then they took Kirk Cousins.
Mm-hmm.
And I think overall it worked out well for them. Granted, both of them ultimately ended up leaving, but RG3 was a rookie of the year. Played well for him. Unfortunately got hurt. But Kirk stepped right in and was able to play well enough for him. Now, granted, they didn't want to pay him, but he at least performed admirably. So there's precedent for this. This has been done in the past before.
Yeah, and it worked out very well for them. And so, again, that's why I think for Cleveland, why not, right? At this point in time, you're rebuilding your franchise. I think that was ultimately a smart decision. We'll see what happens with Shadur and Dylan Gabriel and Deshaun Watson, who isn't going to be able to play this year because of an injury, but because of what his contract is. I mean, he's going to be a factor there.
1,000%.
But I think, your hope is, you're able to cut bait on him in the next year or two, because either Dylan Gabriel, Shadur has shown you something that they can be your, franchise quarterback, or at least your quarterback of the near future. So that was the big story coming out of the NFL draft. You did also have some other interesting names there from the quarterback selections. Just quickly, you did have Kyle McCord from Syracuse. He goes in the 6th round to the Eagles. We mentioned Will Howard, the national championship winner at Ohio State. He goes to the Steelers in the 6th round. So as it stands right now, I mean, if you're the Steelers, you have Mason Rudolph and Will Howard. And, that leads a lot of people to believe that the Aaron Rodgers situation is going to get resolved soon and he will be a Steeler. But that is their quarterback situation right now. You have Riley Leonard, who goes to the Colts, which that one's pretty hilarious because he's essentially, he's Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson combined into one player. And so I guess they figured that was, in case of injury, right, to be the easiest transition from a playbook standpoint. So that's kind of funny. How about this? Graham Mertz. He gets selected in the 6th round by the Texans. That one definitely surprised me a little bit. You had Curtis Rourke. He goes in the 7th round to the 49ers from Indiana. And then the last quarterback taken was Quinn Ewers. He is taken by the Dolphins in the 7th round to back up Tua Tagovailoa. According to Des Bryant, Quinn Ewers is already better than Tua, so he should be the starter next year, based on what he was posting on social media over the weekend. But some interesting names there out of the quarterback carousel. I know a lot of people surprised that Quinn Ewers fell as far as he did. And outside of the Shadur drama and everything going on around that, I do think the conversation around Quinn Ewers and him opting to go into the NFL draft instead of coming back and making potentially $5-6 million this year in NIL, that's going to be a pretty big storyline as well in terms of what kind of precedent does that maybe set moving forward in college football.
Yeah, and maybe he just doesn't want to deal with the whole Arch Manning thing. Like, he's already been looking over his shoulder the past couple seasons anyway. He's just like, I don't want to.
He may just not want to go somewhere else, right, and start over. If I'm going to start over, let me just do that.
Yeah,
in the NFL.
In the NFL, where if it doesn't work out, they're gonna cut me anyway. So
I was about to say, there's worse places you could spend your free time. And
besides, did he expect to go that low?
Right. Like,
I mean,
he
probably thought he was going to be like in the 5th round. You probably thinking, oh, maybe I'm a 5th round guy, not a 7th round. But.
Like you see Rourke go ahead of you. You see Graham Mertz go ahead of you. It's like, what? But again, you're in Miami of all places. You could be, dreading going up to like Seattle where it rains all the time, and but
you gotta be careful.
So Jalen Milrose shouldn't be excited about going to Seattle. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, conditions probably aren't as favorable. A lot of QB power for him in the install period.
I don't know. Quarterbacks in Miami tend to have their cars stolen, so you better watch out.
No, that's just college.
You sure?
In the league.
Okay.
In the league, they protect you.
Okay.
His girlfriend got her car back at least. I don't know about him.
Maybe if you're a wide receiver, you get arrested on the way to the stadium. So.
Well.
Yeah. It's factual. But I mean, if you're Quinn Ewers too, again, he's a decorated Texas legend. He'll forever be, ingrained. Like, hey, he took him to 2 playoff appearances, got a win, last year. But, in the grand scheme of it all, you at least got your name called. And I think that's kind of just like.
And that means a lot for a lot of guys.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's, man, do your thing. And again, it's shown that Tua ain't really going to finish a season.
Oh, no. I mean, you're going to have an opportunity to play, you would imagine.
Yeah. And Zach Wilson is the backup. Point.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think it's a bad spot for Quinn to be in. It's just, I think that's an interesting conversation that I do want to come back to later in the show, is just kind of what he potentially gave up to go to the NFL and what that's worth. Because we kind of talked about that a little bit on Morning Jocks with Isaiah Bond, and just how some of these decisions maybe impact you in the bigger picture. And a lot of these guys that aren't looking at the bigger picture, or they have a little bit of buyer's remorse now and regret some of these decisions and how it's going to affect them financially in the long run. But yeah, that's kind of the big takeaways there from the first weekend of the draft. Again, Alabama, 7 players selected. Jalen Milroe, he goes 3rd round there to the Seattle Seahawks. Auburn had 3 players drafted. Jarquez, the first player off the board there, he goes to the Rams. And then, of course, Shadur Sanders making it all the way to the 5th round before he was taken by the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, and when I look at, again, Auburn's kind of one of those teams where it wasn't, like kind of expected that they were going to have just a litter of guys. But I think Keandre Lambert-Smith going to the Chargers. The Chargers are definitely making a point to Quentin Johnston by drafting all these receivers, saying, big dog, if you do not get it together, we will happily let you go.
Yeah, there's a path to playing time for sure.
1,000%. But, and again, when you look at all the, the changes that happened in Alabama, and yet the product is still the same. Like, it's still going to sell itself. Guys are going to get drafted. Guys are going to find themselves in the NFL. So it's an exact, again, you can say whatever you want about the Kalen DeBoer era so far, changing within the system, and guys are still getting their numbers called. And I think that, overall in the SEC, it just continues to show that the elite talent is here. Now, the Big Ten has definitely closed the gap a good little bit, but when it all said and done, the SEC still dominates as far as the guys that play on Saturdays here in the South. You see exactly what they're going to do in the NFL.
No, I think you are. I think you're absolutely right there. So we'll continue to break down what happened over the weekend and the NFL draft. Some more interesting news and notes to get to. You did have some Alabama and Auburn players as well that weren't drafted but signed undrafted free agent deals. So we'll tell you about where some of those guys ended up as well. But of course, as we do every Monday, when we come back here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, we will talk to the one, the only Paul Finebaum. That's coming up next on Jocks 94.5.
7:22 here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order, and John Saber here with you. And as we do each and every Monday, we talk to the mouth of the South, the man Paul Finebaum, presented by our friends at Craneworks.
Lift it, load it, grade it, grind it, move it, haul it, rig it, dig it, Craneworks, Rentalworks, yeah, the big dog's got it.
Paul Finebaum on Mac and Cube in the morning is brought to you by Craneworks. Lift it, buy it, rent it, the big dog's got it. Now, Paul Finebaum.
And Paul, we appreciate you hopping on with us, talking some ball, and just recapping the NFL draft. Of course, the biggest, headline is going to be Shadur Sanders falling off. But just what are your overall thoughts of the NFL draft weekend?
Well, it's hard to get past that, but I think it would be wise for everybody to do that. But not to sound like I'm coming to you live from SEC Network headquarters, but the idea that the SEC continues to dominate the draft, I think is a shot back at all those who have wondered and pontificated about the decline of the league. National championships are the most important indicator, but ultimately in selling the SEC football brand, the most important thing is what happens on the final Thursday of April every year, and that's the draft. And once again, it happened. And it was interesting to see Texas in there, of course. It comes as no surprise, but I think it just goes to show you how wise a decision that was of the SEC to include them. But overall, this league is still where it has been now for almost 20 years, dominating the sport.
So, Paul, I wanted to ask you about Quinn Ewers, and if you think what happened with him, is that going to kind of maybe set the tone for players in the future? Because you had a guy in Quinn Ewers who, if he came back for another year this year, we were hearing $4, $5, $6 million in NIL for Quinn Ewers to come back and play quarterback somewhere. He now ends up as a 7th-round pick in the NFL draft. Do you think his story is going to be maybe a cautionary tale for some guys in the future when it comes to considering, do they want to come back for another year of NIL, or is it worth it to just get a start on their professional career?
I think it's a cautionary tale that you probably ought to get really good advice. And listen, as somebody who saw Quinn Ewers a lot this past year, he just wasn't that great. Everyone knows that. I walked around the Cotton Bowl at halftime of the Ohio State game, and I can't tell you how many Texas fans yelled at me. And when I walked over to say hello, they said, why is this guy still playing quarterback? And by the way, that was the team that came within a play or two of making the national championship. So you have to be smart. He just let his ego get in the way, and he made a terrible decision. He would not have been at Texas. We all know that. They didn't want him anymore. And he would have been somewhere like Carson Beck, making a lot of money, having a good time, and maybe working on his skills as opposed to be humiliated the way he was.
Here with Paul Finebaum, as we are each and every Monday, presented by our friends at Craneworks. And Paul, got kind of like a two-parter dealing with the SEC going into the fall. Now that we've wrapped up spring and things like that, is there a team, one, that you're kind of optimistic about, that you got a good feel for? And on the other side of it, is there a team that you just still have a lot of question marks heading into the fall?
Well, I feel really good about Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma has got it together, from a quarterback standpoint, from an offensive coordinator standpoint, both of whom, of course, came from Washington State. I think they filled in some gaps. And I think Brent Venables realized that he just wasn't quite prepared for the SEC. Also, I think bringing in somebody you guys know, Jim Nagy, from the Senior Bowl may have been the best move of the offseason. I talk to NFL people a lot and college administrators, and everyone is raving about him. Another school I really like is South Carolina. Lenore Sellers is at the very top rung of quarterback, so I expect them to make a tremendous difference. On the other side, I think you have to be worried about Tennessee. I know that I'm probably not breaking a news story here, but what is the quarterback situation really going to be like? Listen, Aguilar is serviceable. They have two backups who have no experience, but I think that's a tremendous drop off. And considering Georgia is right out of the chute, at Alabama, at Florida, you have to be a little bit worried about them. Another school, by the way, I feel better about than I have in a while is Auburn. I think Hugh Freeze has made some very, very important decisions really from a recruiting standpoint. I'm incredibly impressed with what Auburn has done. And one more, just to keep piling on here on the plus side, is the fact that Alabama retained its roster in the spring. To me, is one of the best examples of confidence in Kalen DeBoer. I think the way this spring went was significant. The schedule is a little tricky, but I think DeBoer has to feel very good that he held on to everyone.
Well, that's actually where I was going to go with you next, Paul, because, yeah, as you mentioned, Alabama, if my numbers are correct, the only SEC team to not have a scholarship player transfer during this portal cycle. So do you think when you look at this Alabama team and in year 2 of Kalen DeBoer, do you just look at it as a situation where there was so much turnover last year that there was no way that you were going to, I guess, have everything in place from a culture standpoint and a coaching staff standpoint, that now this really feels like Kalen DeBoer's team now officially going into year 2 in Tuscaloosa?
There are always outliers, but almost every new coach at a school like Alabama just loses a game, just getting caught up in the crossfire. And I think that game was Vanderbilt last year. I'll never be able to explain the Oklahoma game, I think, other than maybe to put the blame on some attitude, and I'll start with the fact that Jalen Milroe just didn't show up. But ultimately, to me, Kalen DeBoer made a few mistakes, and it cost him a playoff bid. I think you can correct that. I think he already knows. He already has a better staff. I think if Ryan Grubb had been there last year, Alabama would have been in the playoffs. I think he was that important. And some people will argue, well, Kalen DeBoer is the architect. He is the architect, but the problem is coaching at Alabama is not like coaching at Washington. There are so many more things to deal with. And I think he just became overwhelmed last year. I think he was also too lax on discipline. And I mean, I'm not talking about cracking down hard, but just the fact that he went in there, he lost a couple of key players on before the first week was over. And I'm referring to McLaughlin, Caleb Downs, and obviously Julian Sand. Isaiah Bond was out of there. I think he was just a little shook. So he took the ice cream and cake approach, and quite frankly, it didn't work. That doesn't mean he can dial it all the way back. But with a guy like Ryan Grubb, who's more of an enforcer, who's somebody who has a much closer hand on the actual player every day, I think he's going to benefit greatly.
And Paul, before we get you out of here, I just want to know, what do you expect to see from both Auburn and Alabama? What's their ceiling, both schools, and also what's their floor?
Well, I think in Alabama, ceiling is the national championship. It's breaking news. I hope nobody had to pull over on the interstate when I said that. But I think that the most important goal is just to eliminate the clunkers like last year. Vanderbilt and Oklahoma were inexcusable. There's no way to escape that. I think for Auburn, it's being competitive in the SEC, and you can't lose a game like Vanderbilt at home. You can't just throw away non-conference games like they did last year against Cal. It's just little silly things. The Oklahoma game, inexcusable. I just gave you 3 games that Auburn should have won. Now you do the math. What's the record? I mean, they have a pretty good record right now. And I think they have to be able to do that. I think the opener is a little bit scary because you're going it's a hostile situation on the first Friday night with a new quarterback. But I think they'll live and die with Jackson Arnold. Ultimately, though, I think it's a much better team. I think it's a much better staff, and I think somewhere in that 8-win range it would be considered successful. I know that's below Auburn standards. Maybe 9, but you can't go below 8. I mean, otherwise the program just looks like it is literally stuck in the mud. One more thing on Auburn. The draft the other day really was Hugh Freeze's friend. It just shows how deplorable the situation was when he got there. We knew it. We've heard it. We've heard John Cohn give us statistics. We've heard Hugh Freeze talk about it. But when you look at the draft and you need an FBI squad to find an Auburn player who was taken, you know how bad the situation was when he got there.
Quickly, Paul, I did want to get your thoughts on this situation at Arkansas because we know their collective now trying to recoup some money from Madden Iamaliava as well as a former wide receiver. Then we find out over the weekend that Arkansas has contacted Tom Mars to handle the situation. So I think we all know how this is going to end. But for you, Paul, what do you expect out of this situation at Arkansas? How do you think this is going to play out?
Well, I know a lot of people say, well, they're doing the right thing, and we all understand that. But I think the problem for universities, when you try to go to court, when you try to start suing players that you recruited and offered, you run a big risk of getting a very bad reputation. I would let it go. Arkansas can live without the money. You just make it too draconian. And I know he had an agreement, and I know he made money, and that's fair. But ultimately, this goes on every day, everywhere. And do you want to be the school that young players are afraid of going in case a mistake is made? I think it's a bad look for Arkansas, and they have enough problems in football right now without bringing in a bunch of guns like Tom Mars to make it worse.
All right. Well, that is Paul Finebaum. He joins us each and every Monday here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Thanks to our friends at Craneworks. Thank you, Paul.
A pleasure, guys. Thank you.
That is Paul Finebaum. You'll hear him every Monday or every weekday here on Jocks 94.5 from 2 to 6 on the Paul Finebaum Show. And he joined us on the Higginbotham Hotline. You deserve solutions that are built for you. Higginbotham is your one-source solution for insurance, financial, and HR services.
Yeah, we'll continue the conversation on the other side. What is the ceiling and floor for both Alabama and Auburn? Also get your reaction to everything that happened over the weekend. 205-834-9450. Your text message, your calls, always welcome here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Keep it locked. 7:37. Welcome back into McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Damian Conrad and John here with you, holding things down for the guys today. We appreciate Paul Finebaum hopping on with us as he does each and every Monday, presented by our friends at Craneworks. And kind of, we'll discuss the NFL draft a little bit later, but just the conversation that we had as far as the ceiling floor with both Alabama and Auburn. And Alabama, Paul said, it's still the national title. Like, no matter what the changes that you had with Kalen DeBoer coming in, the expectation is still national championship. And we had Connor O'Gara on last week on Mac and Cube too, and he said that, playoffs or bust is a fair expectation for this Alabama unit in year 2 under Kalen DeBoer. And, because we've seen so much success with the University of Alabama the past 17 years under Nick Saban, it felt like you would have thought this Alabama team last year was like 2 games under 500 from just the level of success that we had seen. And it was a drop off. It was change, and it became uncomfortable when you're losing to the likes of, the Vanderbilts of the world and how it looked against Oklahoma in that loss. And you saw it with your own 2 eyes because you were there in Norman. But then you got the loss to Tennessee, and then of course Michigan in the bowl game, even with Michigan not being at 100%, essentially playing their second team defense, and Alabama just looked like, let's get this season over with. But when you see in the spring that no scholarship players hit the transfer portal, it's okay. The depth that you have there and the team is still, connected in a lot of areas. And then you look at some of the return and production that you have. I do agree with Paul. The conversation of national championships still shouldn't be out of the conversation. It shouldn't be out of your breath of, nah, man, if, we lost all these pieces and we lost all these games last year. Well, now you're in year 2 under the same system. And if you go back and with Nick Saban, I mean, from 7-6 the first year he got there to 14-1. And it's okay. Well, yeah, this thing can be turned around in a year's time, but it's just going to look different under Kalen DeBoer. But you get Ryan Grubb as the OC. A lot of areas there, you get a new quarterback, but the pieces around all of this still lets the expectation still be national championship or bust.
Yeah, and I think, I think there would just be a different perspective. And I think it's starting to change now, but at least earlier on in the offseason, right? If you have the same record that you did last year, and I know the bowl game really left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, including my own. But what happens if you're 9-3 last year, but you had lost to Georgia, Tennessee, and LSU, right? You won 2 of those games. You did lose the Tennessee game, but if those are the 3 losses you have, I just wonder how different the perspective is, because maybe it's more of getting, the first year in the SEC, the competition level, it's just a little bit higher. You had all the growing pains of bringing in a new staff. You could have understood that, right? But it's the fact that you lost to the Vanderbilts, you lost to Oklahoma the way that you did, that really left people, I think, starting to scramble and wonder, is Kalen DeBoer really the right fit? And I think now, now that we have some separation between that, obviously bringing in Ryan Grubb, I think, has done a lot in terms of the optimism that people have around the program. But you go back and you look at things like last year, and you look at Jalen Milroe's numbers over the second half of the season, and you start to go, okay, like there are reasons for optimism around this Alabama team, and a lot of them have to do with people that aren't there anymore. And again, that's nothing against, I'm not turning this into a poo-poo on Jalen Milroe party, but again, that's where I start when I look at what I'm excited for with Alabama this upcoming season is just getting more consistency. And that was always the thing with Ty Simpson. And I understand the people, well, he's been there for 4 years. He's had an opportunity. Tyler Buckner started over him in the USF game a couple years ago. And I get all of that. But just looking at what you have on your roster and what your outlook is for this season, there's no reason to not think that Alabama shouldn't be better. And you start with, on the defensive side of the ball, the second half of the year last year compared to the first half. And once those guys really started to understand Kane Womack's system, and now you have a lot of those guys that were freshmen that are now sophomores, I think we can all understand that that's an area you expect Alabama to be better. And you expect them to be towards the top of the SEC. And then offensively, yes, you're going to have to find a way to make up the production that you got from Jalen Milroe and what he did with his legs. But everything outside of that, you should be better off. Your passing offense should be significantly better than it was last year. You should be getting more from your running backs because you're going to have to, because you don't have that, element of the run game from the quarterback position. I mean, you look at just the frustration you could see on the wide receivers' faces and a guy like Ryan Williams, who we know how special he was, but he didn't really have the second half of the season that a lot of people were expecting us to. And a lot of that was because the passing game just completely fell off with Jalen Milroe. So all of those things should be better. And that's why I look at what you got last year and you can say, well, you beat Georgia already. You beat LSU. Like, you've shown that you can beat the teams that are maybe the toss-up games, right? Those are the games that will ultimately decide, do you make the playoff or not? You weren't expecting that to be the Vanderbilt and Oklahoma games. And so I think this year, again, like Paul's saying, if you just shore up some of those things, you don't have those big letdowns. It's very easy to see why Alabama should be at the worst 10-2 back in the college football playoff. And if everything does come together, like we've talked about with Ty Simpson, if he does prove to be a top 20 quarterback in college football, there's no reason that Alabama shouldn't have expectations of playing for and winning a national championship. Doesn't mean they're going to, but I don't think it's as far out of reach, because you have a lot of people that I think are just expecting, I don't even know if they're going to make it back to the playoff. And maybe they won't, but that should be the floor, in my opinion. The floor for Alabama this year is making the playoff and losing competitively in the first round. That should be the floor. Anything other than that is a failure.
Yeah, and then you flip it over to the other side of the state at Auburn. Again, to me, I say it a lot, but it can't get any worse. At least it should not get any worse. Now, what version of Jackson Arnold do you get? Does Hugh Freeze unlock the mental state of Jackson Arnold of saying, listen, man, you're not at Oklahoma anymore. The change of scenery is better for everybody. We've dealt with Peyton Thorne for 2 years, and we didn't find a way to make it work. And then you look at the talent that they have at the receiver position. It's elevated. Like, it's worth the conversation of them having one of the best groups in the league. And then at the running back position, it's more of a running back by committee, where you already had Jarquez Hunter in the backfield and didn't, take full advantage of what you had. So now I think a lot of it is just dealing on the offensive side of the ball with Jackson Arnold. What can Jackson Arnold do? Now, I know it's a lot of pressure playing quarterback anyway, but it's shown in Hugh Freeze's system that if the quarterback clicks, it looks flawless. Like, it looks like it's supposed to work. He did it with Bo Wallace, man. He did it with Chad Kelly. Like, no offense to them, but man, it's got to work with Jackson Arnold. It has to. And then defensively, with returning DJ Durkin and a lot of young pieces on the defensive side who had to play as freshmen, now they're another year in the system. So to me, it's just supposed to work.
Yeah, it is. Sorry, I'm getting roasted on Twitter by Saber right now. That was funny. He said I look like Shane Gillis today because I shaved and have a mustache.
Pudgy cheeks don't help.
No, they don't. They don't.
Until you said something like.
No, I know. That's the worst part, is like I have to look at that and go, dadgummit. And I've been hitting the gym too. Apparently I got to keep hitting the gym. I wish I had the bank account of Shane Gillis though.
If it makes you feel better, Damian was incorrect too. He said when Saban got there, the next year, first year wasn't 7-6. They had vacated wins. They were 2-6.
Yeah, the old vacated wins. Yeah.
Got those out of the way.
They didn't happen.
No, got those out of the way early.
I blame Shula.
That's right. But no, back to Auburn. That really threw me off there. But that was good, Saber. I can't deny it, unfortunately. But getting back to Auburn, no, I'm with you in the sense of it can't be worse if you're Auburn, right? Surely it cannot be worse. And the question with Jackson Arnold is just how good can he be? Because I think for Auburn, right, the floor this year has to be 8 wins, right? You have to be able to get to 8 wins, and you have the talent to do that. And I thought Paul actually brought up a really good point with the draft and how that kind of is just a reflection of what Hugh Freeze has had to work with so far, because they had 3 players drafted. Jarquez is the only Auburn guy that got drafted, right? Keandre Lambert-Smith, you got him out of the portal last year. Right. Jalen McLeod, you got him out of the portal 2 years ago. So in terms of carryovers from like the Brian Harsin era, you had Jarquez. That was it, right? In terms of homegrown talent that was worthy of a draft selection, and he was taken in the 4th round. And so now you look at what he's built. I mean, you've got on this roster now, I mean, you would think in the wide receiver room alone, you might have multiple first-round picks, right? And so you just look at the talent level that you have at Auburn now and look at what a lot of these young guys on the defensive side of the ball can develop into ultimately. There's no reason that Auburn shouldn't be significantly better as well. And I do think that when it comes to, dark horse playoff contenders, Auburn's a team where you look and you go, if everything goes right, you could see their ceiling being pretty high. But even with the problems that they've had the last couple of years under Hugh Freeze, this is the year where you've stacked together the top 10 recruiting classes. You've done a lot of work through the portal. You have a roster that, based on what we've been told, is over the $20 million mark. That's what we were hearing about Ohio State last year and Texas last year. And I'm not saying that you have to be playing for national championship or bust this year if you're Auburn, but when you look at those numbers and you see what kind of talent that puts on your roster compared to what we had last year, that's where the expectations come into play. And so, yeah, I think for both Alabama and Auburn, I think they were in significantly better spots than they were this time a year ago. It's just a matter of, can you make it actually happen on the field, right? Because for Auburn, we've been saying this now for a couple of years. This is finally the year. We thought last year was going to be the year. This year, it finally has to be the year. And similarly for Alabama and Kalen DeBoer, this year has to be the year. You can't have another year of, oh, well, the offense just didn't come together and, November in some FCC game against an unranked opponent, right? That can't happen anymore. Similarly for Auburn, you can't go and lose your first game to Baylor. You can't do that. You just can't. You have to set the tone early on and get the ball rolling early to have momentum going into SEC play. But I think both Alabama and Auburn should have those things.
Especially for Auburn with Oklahoma a couple of weeks after that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad that other people are coming around on I saw Greg doing his podcast this week. He was talking about Oklahoma, Paul mentioning Oklahoma. I'm glad I'm not the only one that's.
Yeah, because you rock with Mateer, man.
He's good, dude. You could make an argument that he's the best quarterback in the SEC right now. Based on what he did last year, I know he played at Washington State. The dude had 45 touchdowns last year. Again, he threw for 30, ran for 15.
Hey, listen, you be pounding the tape, dog.
He's good.
You good.
He's good.
You good with me.
And when you're not pounding Bud Light, man, yeah. Look at what could happen. Hanging out with Post Malone.
Yeah, I was about to say, man, I wish I got to hang out with Post Malone. That would make this a little better. But
he's a Texas guy. You hanging out with Texas. You're a big Oklahoma fan. And see, that's what it was. I'm telling you, that trip to Norman did just like irreversible damage to you. Like you started to like it a little bit.
It's a nice campus.
So
I saw the softball stadium where their scoreboard's in the shape of the state of Oklahoma. And it was like, man, that's cool. I like that.
So you are an Oklahoma guy. That's what you're saying.
No, I despise them with every fiber of my being, but
you can give respect where it's due.
I'm a professional, so I have to acknowledge that I think they're going to be a lot better this year. I just hope that they're
not.
I hope they're not for the one game when they come to Tuscaloosa.
We'll keep the conversation going on the other side. Hear from you, 205-834-9450. Your text message, your calls, always welcome here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Keep it locked on Jocks 94.5. 7:53 here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order, John Saber here with you, holding things down for the guys on this Monday morning. Let me tell you about our friends at Train. Spring weather in Alabama can be really unpredictable. That's why you need the reliability of a Train, voted America's most trusted HVAC brand. And right now, you can receive up to a 10-year warranty on parts and labor on select Train home comfort systems. Found out more at train.com. Having a conversation just during the break. Conrad is officially Boomer Sooner. I actually have a Boomer Sooner shirt. I mean,
I'm good.
It's
you
it's a medium, but I don't.
A schmedium?
Yeah, it fits tight. After a couple push-ups, you'll be all right.
Well, I don't know if Shane Gillis could fit into that. So
yeah, I don't know what's more surprising that not the fact you look like Shane Gillis or that Damian went down to New Orleans and didn't come back looking like Zion or Booger McFarland.
No, we did. I did eat good though. I did eat good at Crawfish Etouffee. It was spot on. But we partied hard. I walked most of it off on Bourbon Street.
Yeah, that'll help.
Yeah.
Did you go to Cafe Du Monde?
No. I went to we went to the Cat's Meow though, the karaoke bar. It was fun. It was fun. We had a great time.
Sorry, I mentioned somewhere that doesn't have alcohol. That was a stupid question on my part. I apologize. Of course you didn't go there.
No, they got Irish coffee.
But yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure they've got something. Well, somebody that's a big fan of the team there in New Orleans, that would be the Saints and their shiny new quarterback, Tyler Shuck. He's been waiting on the phone lines. Our buddy Chris wants to chime in this morning. How are we doing this morning, Chris?
We're just fine. The Sabres called me Atlanta Falcons fan, and you just got lobbied to Oklahoma Sooner, man. Damian, man, there's just a lot of accusations going around that are clearly untrue. What's going on with that, Conrad? I don't understand.
It's just Accusation Monday. That's what we're calling it now.
I guess so. A baseless accusation. But we're talking about Shadur Sanders thing, right? First of all, let's address the elephant in the room saying the Atlanta Falcons DC coordinator, that prank phone call stuff.
Yeah,
if he isn't fired or at least suspended for half a season, I don't know what's wrong with that.
Well, I mean, it was his son. He didn't do anything. I mean, he can't help his son.
No. Hold on. No. Here's the thing. That's a very private information that you just leave out aimlessly. What, are you part of the Trump administration when it comes to leaking?
He was at the house and his son grabbed his iPad. Like, he was at the house.
That's someone's private information. 1, 2. Last is Tyler Shuck, people. Versus like the best available on the board. How are they that stupid?
I don't know. You're the Falcons fan. You tell us.
No, you are Brian. Trust. Okay.
Ooh, got me.
Anyway, but the key is.
Sorry, gotta go.
Hour number 2 here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order, John Saber here with you. Also, you as well, our wonderful listeners, 205-834-9450. Your text message, your calls, always welcome here. Just going back and kind of looking back at the NFL draft. And, John, I do want to get your thoughts on the Saints taking Tyler Shough in the second round. Is it kind of one of those, okay, maybe if Derek Carr does come back and is 100%, is it more of the first sign of he's not what he used to be, or if it starts to go downhill, do you throw the rookie in there and just kind of say, hey, we'll build this thing up around you, or does he start day one?
I don't expect him to start day one. I don't think he's that good. What I would like to say, I mean, if Derek Carr is ready to go, then yeah, that's your best option. Okay, sure, fine, I get it. But if not, you go with someone that, because you still have Spencer Rattler on staff, so you got someone that started and has played, and so I'm pretty sure that Tyler won't be ready to go, and so you can treat him like any other rookie and just try to keep him ready. And if he shows that he can go, you can put him out there. He's not with him not being a first round draft pick. There's no immediacy to absolutely have him out there and make sure, okay, yeah, we gotta get our money's worth. No, it was a second round pick, but we don't have to see him on the field immediately. So I view him more or less as I don't want to call him a project, but I mean, it's one of those like, hey, we have the luxury of time to where he doesn't have to immediately start. If he does, cool. If not, okay, that's fine. They've got, in theory, better options out there. And if all else fails, hell, Aaron Rodgers is still out there. At some point, he may want to play because it looks like he ain't going to Pittsburgh or Minnesota. So he may get tired of being on just McAfee and no one listening to him. What better way to get some pub than go to New Orleans?
Well, so do you think is a situation, because, I mean, Shough's been around for so long, do you think maybe that was part of the decision process was, hey, this is a guy that maybe if we need him, he could play earlier just because of his age and his experience, that maybe he'd be more ready immediately, I guess, as opposed to some of these other guys you viewed as more like a Milroe or somebody that was a true development
that's
project.
That's more, when you hear project, that's more so what you think of, someone like that's going to need time to develop a proper NFL game, and allegedly like Anthony Richardson was supposed to need, but they felt the need that they had to put him out there. With going back to 2012, it looked like, even though he was the rookie of the year, the offense wasn't really tailored like that for RG3 in Washington. It was, I mean, yeah, he was able to run and capitalize on that, but that didn't get him all that far in terms of an NFL career. Yeah, Tyler, if he were to start now, I mean, I think he has the passing ability to be able to do it, which is primarily what's happening now. But apparently he's got Tua Tagovailoa's bone structure, because he's got
3 season-ending injuries.
He's in essence the white Mr. Glass from Unbreakable and Glass. And so I hate that for him. So also, if you realize if you got to put him out there, chances are he'll be coming back kind of quick. I know he doesn't have the same talent level as some of the other quarterbacks out there. I do think he's a good quarterback. I think he has the makings of being a great quarterback, but Michael Penix is older too, and they were willing to let him sit too. Again, they took a first-round draft pick with him. They didn't feel the need. Hey, granted, yes, they had Kirk Cousins out there, so they had a serviceable starter, if not a very, very, very good starter. The Saints don't necessarily have that luxury, but also they can afford to wait. So I think he's in a great situation. I think Tyler Shough's in a great situation.
Yeah, because there's no pressure for him to go out.
Right, yeah.
And then, if you have to develop behind Derek Carr, again, it's kind of one of those things.
I mean, you'll see the field.
Worse.
You'll find a way to be better.
Right.
We know that.
Well, I was about to say, I guess if you're the Saints too, and you're looking at like worst case scenarios, I mean, I guess your worst case scenario is you're picking in the top 5 next year, and maybe you can get like an Arch Manning or somebody. And obviously from the family connection, that would be a big win. But, I guess you look at it as, okay, worst case scenario, we're bad again. And then we're just back in the situation next year. Maybe you like the quarterback crop next year. And so you feel, okay, well, we'll wait until next year. If we have another first round pick in that spot, then
which is
maybe we make a move there.
Which is why I felt they did need to take Shadur or any quarterback in the first round, because there wasn't anyone in this draft, save for Cam Ward, and even then, I think he's a good prospect, but I don't think he's that can't miss. Oh yeah, absolutely.
In a lot of
he's
years, he maybe wouldn't have been the number one overall pick.
Correct, right.
Yeah.
And so with what looks like to be a stellar draft class coming in next year, to me, might as well, hey, you know what? Why don't you take the best couple of players available in those early rounds.
Yeah.
If quarterback falls to you late, okay, yeah, fine, go for that. But get what you need, bolster up the team so that way next year, because chances are you probably won't be great. Or if you're great this year, somehow you find your quarterback, whomever it is.
Yeah. Now, I will say the Titans after day one, I really was impressed of how we drafted. I think the guy from the edge from UCLA, he could provide some depth. Because we lost Bud Dupree last year, and we were still kind of deficient there. Io Maynor from Stanford, we saw what he did to Travis Hunter in one game, and it's okay. Well, if he puts it all together, Traylon Burks is just the AFC South version of Quentin Johnston. It's big dog. We drafted you this early, and you haven't produced. We are going to figure this thing out. If you can't play, by God, we are going to stockpile at the receiver position. And I also think Gunnar Helm,
I was about to say, I thought Gunnar Helm was a good pick.
That's big. And with Okonkwo, who has been pretty good for us the past couple seasons, now you got another pass catcher at the tight end position. I think the safety from Penn State, Winston, is going to be okay. Just overall, I think the Titans had a good draft. And, of course, with the number one overall pick in Cam Ward, we're putting pieces around him. And we even signed Xavier Restrepo in the undrafted free agent.
Yeah, reunited him with Cam Ward.
Yeah, I mean, so I think overall, the only team I still just have a question about is the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think every other team pretty much got what they needed, and they can build towards the future with some of their picks. Like, I don't think anybody necessarily reached. Maybe the Carolina Panthers with Tech McMillan, but that's just kind of a personal thing. Like, I think he's a bigger body. I just don't think.
You wanted a number one receiver, and you had to reach a little bit. You know,
right.
You do that.
That's probably the only true reach I saw in the draft of maybe could have gotten them a little bit later. But I think overall, team by team, when you kind of look at where they need, I think Cleveland has, again, just with the Dylan Gabriel, the Shadur Sanders, does it work out? But most of them, it's just what they already have. How is it going to work? As opposed to a lot of these other teams got what they needed in a lot of positions of, okay, well, yeah, if it does work out, they could probably build some depth towards the future.
Yeah, and I think, I thought the Browns had a really good draft. And I think when you look at what they did, early on, they, addressing the defensive side of the ball with Mason Graham, getting maybe the best, defensive line prospect outside of Abdul Carter. But then you go and you have a very exciting, just a very intriguing backfield now with getting Quinshawn in the second round. And then you got Dylan Sampson in the fourth round. So those are both guys that you would expect to be able to make an impact immediately for you this year. And maybe even, with Nick Chubb being a free agent, I would assume this is their way of saying he's not coming back and he's not going to be a member of the Cleveland Browns moving forward. But then again, I really like what they did with the quarterback situation where you now have a battle between Dylan Gabriel and Shadur Sanders. And so you've essentially doubled your chances of finding your quarterback for the future. They added a tight end out of Bowling Green as well there. But I mean, really offensive heavy, their last 5 picks of the draft. And you've, when you look at the Browns, okay, maybe neither of the quarterbacks work out, but you can see out of the running back position, they're clearly better. They have more optimism now at the quarterback position than they've had probably since Baker Mayfield's rookie season, when he looked like he was going to be the future of that franchise and he ended up not being. So, no, I think the Browns, and I think there's a lot of teams where you look at the order that they drafted and people were being very critical, but then you look at their overall draft and, because I know the Browns were one, for example, where I had a lot of people that were, would people look at their draft differently if they had made different selections at different times, right? Like if Quinshawn, maybe that had been your 3rd round pick and you had taken Shadur in the 2nd round or something, would people look at, well, maybe you reached a little bit for Quinshawn, but everyone expected Shadur to go in a spot like that. And you look at some of the picks they made, and while overall maybe they reached for where they got certain guys, they ultimately got the guys that they were looking for. And I think, overall, you just look across the league and there weren't many teams that just kind of had head-scratching drafts. I think the Steelers would definitely be one that you mentioned with not solidifying the quarterback position. But you look at a lot of the teams that needed to get better. And, I think you just walk away, and there's a lot of teams that immediately got better. We talked about the Falcons. I thought the Falcons had an excellent draft.
Yeah.
Especially what they did bolstering their defense on day one, trading back up into the first round. I thought that was excellent. I know a lot of people have been critical of Jacksonville and what they did in their draft, giving up a lot to go and get Travis Hunter. But hey, you thought that was a guy that can come in and change an organization. That's going to cost you some picks. And if that's what you think you should do, then who am I to knock that? But they go and we talked about Jalen McLeod, one of the Auburn players drafted, but getting him in the 6th round, I think that's an excellent value pick. Somebody that can come in and give you some depth on the defensive line there. They got a defensive back out of Tulane, Caleb Bransall, who's a really, really good player. Like the Jaguars overall, I thought had a really, really good draft as well. And I mean, you even look at, we talked about the Chargers and what they did, adding a lot of wide receiver help with Trey Harris and Keandre Lambert-Smith and some of these guys. You just go around the league and you look at all these draft classes, and it's overall pretty solid. And a lot of that goes back to what we heard going into the draft, where a lot of people were saying once you got to about pick 11, any pick from between 11 to the end of the 2nd round was viewed very similarly in terms of the talent level that you were getting. And so it was a very deep draft class, maybe just not one that was stacked with a lot of elite talent. And I think you saw that with a lot of very big value picks and a lot of guys that we all remembered dominating here in the SEC. And you're like, man, that guy's a 5th round pick. Okay, well, yeah, I could easily see where that guy is going to go in and contribute immediately. So it's going to be very interesting to see how we look back on this year's draft class, because I think overall it's one of the better ones in recent memory, just in terms of teams addressing a lot of the needs that they had. There were a lot of value picks even into day 3 on Saturday.
And I think the New York Giants is another team as well. When they got Abdul Carter early on, you do trade back in to get Jackson Dart, and then picking up Cam Scatterboo late. I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to be, Saquon 2.0, but as far as what you saw from him at Arizona State, like he literally got the team on his back and took it to overtime with Texas. Like he was the offense for Arizona State. And I think you get some good value there. Now, a lot of it is kind of what's the tread on the tires? Like, how's he going to be as far as, if he gets to the league and has to, run the ball 20, 25 times a game, the wear and tear is going to pack up. But overall, like you said, when you look at just the NFL draft as a whole, the question marks I have for teams, it's not really a lot about the rookies. It's what do you already have in place? What is going to be the biggest benefit for some of these rookies that you are bringing in? And like I say, we talk about the Chargers and what they've done is, again, I go back to Quentin Johnson, and then you lose Keenan Allen a couple years ago, and it's, okay, well, Justin Herbert's going to have to throw it to somebody. I know Jim Harbaugh wants to run the football, but the fact that, okay, we're going to have to, if Justin Herbert is good, we're going to pay him all this money. We're going to have to air this thing out at some point. And I think that the AFC West division as a whole, they all drafted well, and they drafted specific needs. And I mean, you look at Las Vegas Raiders with them getting Ashton Genty. I mean, again, it's just the pieces that are around them. I think that this NFL draft, we may look at as, when coming into it, it's okay, nobody's just a home run, but there's a lot of doubles. There's a lot of a lot of people that got on base a good bit because of where the positions that they got later on, like just through the entire weekend. The first round, it's like, okay, yeah, I can see how it goes. But the Atlanta Falcons addressed a lot of needs on the defensive side of the ball. And also the Tampa Bay Buccaneers truly unlocking everything that Baker Mayfield could be as the number 1 overall pick, where, we had the conversation about Jackson Arnold where he kind of lost it. But then we saw, okay, he stepped in after Tom Brady. Yeah, they're not playing for Super Bowls, but they're competitive, especially in the offensive side of the ball. And they're getting younger, and they're giving Baker some weapons. So I think just overall the weekend ended up being a pretty good weekend for NFL as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, and you just go and look. I mean, I'm just looking at the second round of the draft and some of the names that you had go in the second round, from Quinshawn to the Browns. You had Travion Henderson to the Patriots, Luther Burden to the Bears.
Yeah.
Kind of a replacement there for Keenan Allen. Potentially, I thought that was a great pickup. You had JT Tuimoloau to the Colts there from Ohio State. That was a guy we had talked about with Teron Davenport about potentially the Titans picking up a guy like that. You had Will Johnson, who was should have been a top 15 pick, but he has a knee problem that teams are worried about how that's going to affect him long term in his career. But he goes to the Cardinals. in the second round, that's one of those picks you look at is if he's healthy, if that knee isn't a big issue like some teams are worried about, that's potentially the steal of the draft. You had Nick Scorton, what he did at Texas A&M. He goes to the Panthers in the second round. Trey Harris from Ole Miss, who before he got hurt was, in my opinion, probably the best receiver in the SEC this year, maybe besides Ryan Williams. And you get him in the second round. You get Tate Ratledge, who's one of the best offensive linemen from the last handful of years in the SEC in the second round to the Lions. Thought that was an excellent pickup there. You had Trey Amos, the DB from Ole Miss. He goes in the second round as well. Like just some of these guys, Andrew Makuba goes to the Eagles. And I mean, of course, the Eagles, they just draft incredibly well every single year. But these are guys that you're looking at in the second round and you're going, man, how did this guy, how did these guys fall this far? But there's just so much depth and so much talent there. And, even into the third round with, Princely, Uman-Mielen, for example, going in the third round. You had Siobhan Ravel, the DB from East Carolina, who I know a lot of people didn't hear about, but hearing Nick Saban talk about that guy before the draft, that was one of those guys that, again, is a first-round talent, but was hurt and missed a lot of time this year. Caleb Johnson out of Iowa, the running back that went to the Steelers, that's another guy that I'm not going to be surprised. He's going to be a 1,000-yard rusher this year, taking Najee's spot there for the Steelers. Like, these are the kinds of guys that you were able to get later into Friday night, and then, of course, getting into Saturday and rounds 4 through 7. Just so much talent, and really just an awesome weekend of the NFL draft. I thought it was excellent. I thought Green Bay, there were more people there than they were expecting. I mean, especially on that first night. I mean,
oh my gosh,
just seeing that many people in Green Bay, Wisconsin on a random Thursday night to watch an NFL draft was awesome. So I thought all in all, a really good weekend by the NFL, and they always put on a very good show with the NFL draft, and this weekend was no different.
Absolutely. 205-834-9450. We get to your text message, your calls on the other side. Keep it locked right here on Mac and Cube in the morning. 8:21 here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order, John Saber here holding it down. Of course, our wonderful listeners, we appreciate y'all staying with us. 205-834-9450. That'll get you on the Jocks text lines, phone lines, and here we got some text messages coming in, Conrad.
That we certainly do. 205-834-9450. That'll get you on the text line here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. We have Bama Hater who chimes in this morning with a couple of texts. He says, tell Paul he sounds pathetic trying to explain away how Alabama choked last year, but it's to be expected. No lengthy explanation of any other team he mentioned in the SEC. He says, Damian, just tell it like it is. The run and fake dynasty is over. Bama had 3 fat losses before the Iron Bowl, and they haven't won a national championship in 5 years. He then says, since you aren't reading my tough text, here's an easy one. Who will Alabama fans want back more after 8 games this year? Jalen Milroe or Nick Saban? I feel pretty confident in saying it's not.
It's not going to be Jalen Milroe.
Not going to be Milroe.
But also, I mean, they lost, but they also beat the brakes off of a 15th ranked Missouri team 34-0.
Yeah.
Even in a sloppy, again, imagine beating somebody 34-0 and it not be
It wasn't a great game.
right.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be fine. They still beat the SEC champions in Georgia, too, if I'm not mistaken.
They did. And they beat LSU pretty bad from what I remember as well.
They did indeed.
John, he chimes in. He says, on Alabama and Auburn expectations, the next 2 years, I think, are more crucial for Hugh Freeze. This year, with a new quarterback and better roster, show and prove that this can be the real thing, because when that schedule flips next year, OMG, Florida, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, Bama, Georgia, Tennessee, etc., that will tell it all for Auburn.
Yeah.
That is a good thing to remember, is after this year, the schedules will change.
It's going to change.
Yeah, the schedules will change. Let's see. Doug texts in. He says, the first round of the NFL draft drew 13.5 million viewers. The first round of the NBA playoffs averaged 4.4 million viewers. Yep.
It's going to sell itself. NFL, that shield it's massive.
I'm glad to be one of those 4.4 million. Let's see. Somebody with some suggestions for the next time you go to New Orleans. Got to do Port of Call next time and Fat Harry's in Uptown.
Okay.
So some suggestions for the next time you or anybody else is going to New Orleans. Let's see. John Mack chimes in, I guess, about Alabama. He says, is it natty or bust or make the playoff and lose competitively? Wow, can't explain how much fun it is to watch the slow fall. David got to watch it with Goliath as well.
See, that's listen, John Mack, he's cool, he's funny, but like you lost to a 5-7 Auburn team. I get being a hater. That's cool. Like, you certified hater, but bro, you lost to the same team that you're talking about falling from the graces. They beat Auburn. They didn't have to go to overtime and absolutely blow it against a not good Auburn team.
Yeah, I mean, look, I understand, the standpoint of, oh, well, Alabama's not just talking like they're going to win national championships every year. Okay, and that's fair if you want to knock Alabama for falling from that pedestal. But, I mean, again, we are talking about a team that the floor should be to make the college football playoff, whereas for a school like Texas A&M, making the college football playoff would be the greatest accomplishment they have made on a football field in, 70 years? So
probably even more.
Again, it's just, I understand what you're trying to say of, you're reveling in the fact that Alabama's not essentially guaranteed a spot in the national championship game anymore, like it felt like they were under Nick Saban. But
right.
I mean, again, it's everybody that's in that same category, not just Alabama now, but to each their own. Alan chimes in. He says, Conrad, did you know Damian had a birthday this weekend? Happy birthday, Damian. That being said, he graduated to ML, not SM. I'm confused. Oh, to medium large, not small medium anymore. Go Panthers.
Yeah.
There you go. Your shirt size went up.
If he graduated, that's not necessarily a good thing. Right. If you going up in shirt size like that, I mean.
Right. I stepped on the scale the other day. It's a number I wasn't expecting to see, but I could still squeeze it a medium.
Speaking of which, that's one thing we also got to remind, because it was his birthday. It was also the biggest fumble in probably Jock's history, if not in Damian's history. His birthday 2 years ago, I think. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was that?
So someone called to wish him a happy birthday.
Oh yeah, and you weren't here to answer the phone. Yeah, I remember that.
She called in on 3-man front.
Yeah,
I remember that there, but yeah,
I forgot about that. Yeah, that
I tried to.
You tried.
I try to forget about it, but
And then the
it happens.
best tweet, I was still Twitter at the time. Best tweet ever. Her response was, "I should have just FaceTimed."
Sorry, Damien.
It happens, man.
It happens to the best of us.
Does it?
What'd you get this year from her?
No, it just
Anything?
happens to you.
Absolutely
Nothing?
not.
Oh, it's over now?
Absolutely
Okay.
not.
It is
She
over.
moved on?
We've gone
Okay.
our separate ways.
Oh, okay.
Jody text in. They say John Mateer did lose to 3-9 Wyoming, 14-0. So I need to see him be successful against the SEC consistently before I totally buy in. To that I say touche. That is, I can't.
It's fair.
Can't argue against that.
Wait, is it Washington State?
Can't argue against that. Let's see. Some people getting a kick out of my comparison to Shane Gillis. I'm glad to know that other people agree with that. That makes me feel so good about myself today. Let's see. We have somebody else that chimes in. They say, y'all were dogging DeBoer. I told y'all we aren't going anywhere. It's just a new age of football. Hard to dominate in the same fashion we're accustomed to. Yeah, I think those are fair points. And he also adds Hugh Freeze is trash. Okay. Well, I think we know what side of the state you reside on. Let's see. Jamie Bailey. Good morning, Jamie. He chimes in. He says, with some expectations for Alabama and Auburn, he says the floor for Auburn this year is 7-5. The ceiling is 9-3. For Alabama, the floor is 9-3, and the ceiling is 11-1 with a loss to Georgia. Okay.
Again, like it goes back to our conversation Friday. I'm just hesitant on Georgia because of like everything that happened. Like I saw with my own two eyes an Ole Miss team that was more physical than Georgia.
I'm sorry. I will just say this. And for the Alabama-Georgia game, and I could be totally wrong on this in September when they play, if Georgia was going to beat Alabama, it was going to be last year.
Exactly.
Right? And that's kind of my thing with that game is I know it's in Athens this year, and I'm not saying it's not going to be an incredibly difficult game and that Georgia doesn't have a very good chance to win that game. But that was one of the question marks for DeBoer, right? Is you won that game last year. I know it was a weird way that you won the game, but you slayed that monster in year one. And again, there you cannot convince me there is not a mental aspect of that matchup to Georgia. There is a mental block for them when it comes to playing Alabama. So again, not saying they can't win that game, but I'm certainly not going to chalk that up as a loss preseason for Alabama because I need to see Georgia beat Alabama more than once in the last decade to feel comfortable about doing that. But it is certainly going to be a difficult game, but I appreciate your expectations there for Alabama and Auburn, Jamie. Let's see. Robert chimes in. He says, you forgot the Steelers also have Skylar Thompson in their quarterback room alongside Mason Rudolph and Will Howard. Yeah, there's a reason that I did not mention his name, Robert. I'm sorry.
Just when I thought the Titans had a bad
I intentionally left him out of there because he's just not really part of that equation in my mind. I could be wrong though, but we saw enough of him in Miami the last couple of years.
Yeah, right.
And it was bad when he was in the game. It was bad. And we got to see him a good bit because Tua is, made of glass. But Robert says Quinn Ewers didn't get hit all the time, but Texas O-line wasn't great like everyone thought they were. Go back to the Ohio State game in the college football playoff semifinals. My thing with Quinn Ewers is, again, I think he doesn't have great arm strength, and he has never played a complete season of college football where he hasn't gotten hurt.
Yeah.
I think both of those things significantly hurt him.
And also, I mean, it's if the example you have to give is in the college football playoff against the eventual national champions, there weren't many offensive lines that were stopping Ohio State anyway.
No, you're absolutely right about that. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Bam Hater again. He says Alabama never led against Vanderbilt and scored 3 points against Oklahoma. Tell it all. We all know that. We've talked about that ad nauseum. We're all very well aware of where Alabama came short last year. It's just a matter of you can't let that happen again.
But also what they do against, the top 3 team in Georgia.
I was about to say, if you want to knock them for their losses, you also have to give them flowers for the impressive wins that they did have. Michael says, the angry Miami fan saying Alabama hasn't won a natty in 5 years. Meanwhile, Miami hasn't won a natty since the first term of the George W. Bush administration. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. Somebody says, I'm a Buccaneers fan, and I love the draft that we had. Our offense is absolutely stacked. I will say, yeah, I thought the Buccaneers, I thought y'all had a really nice draft as well. You got some more wide receiver help in Emeka Egbuka. I know some people were frustrated with why did you bring back Chris Godwin if you're going to do that? But I certainly don't think having more weapons for Baker Mayfield is a bad thing. You also got Tej Johnson out of Oregon there late in the draft. But outside of that, a couple of cornerbacks, a couple of edge rushers to fill out that roster there. So yeah, I thought
Tez went to Tampa Bay?
Yep, he did.
Oh wow.
Yep, 7th round pick.
Oh dang.
Let's see. Yeah, someone just says Georgia will be ready this year. The game's in Athens, and the way last year went, they're going to be motivated. Well, yeah, I mean, of course they're going to be motivated. They've been motivated every year, and it hasn't
Right.
changed the fact that they can't get over the hump of beating Alabama, except when it mattered most in the national championship game. Got to give them their flowers for that. They
And
did
that's
do
the
that.
one. And I'm never going to knock Georgia for it, but that's the only one you got. And every other time when y'all play, it's just hard not to look at the evidence. Like, it's right there. The one time you got them, absolutely. It's the national championship. You got them. But since then, we've seen that matchup, and it's still going the same way. I just don't. I don't process it. I just cannot process it.
No, I'm right there with you. And then finally, Drake texts in. He says, "What do y'all think about what my 49ers did in the draft?" I thought the 49ers did well as well. They had Mikael Williams there in the first round out of Georgia. That was their first round pick. They got Alfred Collins, who's a really good defensive tackle there from Texas. We got to see him last year a lot here in the SEC. They get a linebacker out of Oklahoma State. You got Jordan Watkins, wide receiver out of Ole Miss there in the fourth round. I would have liked to maybe see them use an earlier pick on a wide receiver because you did lose Deebo Samuel. Brandon Ayuk got that big contract, didn't quite live up to it. And so right now it's him and Jawan Jennings. So I maybe would have used a pick on wide receiver a little earlier, but you got Jordan James running back out of Oregon to give you some more depth there. I think Curtis Rourke, again, I mean, you hit gold with Brock Purdy. Why not go and try to, strike gold again with your backup there with Curtis Rourke out of Indiana? So yeah, no, I thought the 49ers overall had a pretty solid draft, but you needed to get better on the defensive side of the ball, and you saw that with their first 5 picks. And you added an upside wide receiver who did some nice things at Ole Miss this year in Jordan Watkins. So yeah, I thought the 49ers there had a pretty solid draft as well. But y'all can continue to keep chiming in 205-834-9450. We'll keep reading your text messages throughout the show.
Absolutely. When we return here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, since Conrad has now pledged his allegiance to the Oklahoma Sooners, just talk about the ceiling and floor for the Sooners now with future Heisman Trophy winner John Mateer heading down to Norman, Oklahoma. We'll get Conrad's answer on that on the other side. Keep it locked right here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. 8:38 here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Damian, Conrad, and John holding things down for the guys on this Monday. We appreciate y'all as well, our wonderful listeners. 205-834-9450. Spring weather in Alabama can be really unpredictable. That's why you need the reliability of a Train. Voted America's most trusted HVAC brand. And right now you can receive up to a 10-year warranty on parts and labor on select Train home comfort systems. Find out more at train.com. Guess Conrad got a little nervous.
I mean, don't act like you weren't here at the start of the show. So
No, man.
I mean,
I was handling business, man.
no, that's fine. It's just, I mean, he sometimes he's got to handle business too. It's just interesting how you want to call him out. Like you, not an hour and a half ago, you in the same boat.
No, I was handling business on the morning jocks front.
Okay, that's fine. I get it.
He's the one that's an Oklahoma guy. I thought he was gonna come here and start playing Boomer sooner, getting locked and loaded. He's a big John Mateer guy. He's already put him in the Heisman Trophy candidacy.
No, he knows not to jump teams. Unlike someone on these airways speaking currently, not me.
Oh, I'm a free
Although
agent.
to be fair, didn't you claim you were going to choose one team this year?
I am.
Okay,
I am.
all right.
I've narrowed it down to 15 teams in the SEC.
Okay.
Texas A&M was eliminated after the
So
first
you
weekend.
so Tennessee still a shot.
They do. They still
Okay.
have a chance.
Mhm.
Still have a chance. Man, speaking
So
of
Vanderbilt has a
Tennessee,
chance.
Absolutely.
Okay.
They have a fair chance.
Okay.
Speaking of Tennessee, in New Orleans, some Tennessee fraternity was having like their formal down there, and I was wearing a Florida shirt Saturday, and somebody just walked up to me and said, "Go Vols," and I was just like what? Of course, I mean I forget like what team I'm rooting, and he's just like, "Go Vols." I was like, "Go Vols," and he's like, "What?" I was like, "What you talking about, dog?" And he's just like, "Look at your shirt," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I do have a Florida shirt on, yeah." And I was a Gator fan down there, but Tennessee fans, they do get rowdy. But they are also, I did get a good read on how they feel about Nico leaving. One, they're cool with him leaving. It was the fact that they got Aguilar in return, and they're like, well, he's done this. He did all this at App State. I was like, yeah. So there's a sense of optimism, but it's cautious because they are looking at everything that they lost, and they're like, man, are we about to get back into the dark days? I was like, listen, man, I told him I was a hypo disciple. Like, you do not have to worry. I was like, the system is going to work. It's going to work. It's proven that it has. He's done more with less when he was at UCF. And I mean, he did all he could. And it's just the job at Tennessee. He got him back to relevancy. I was like, no, I don't think it'll be a fall off the face of the earth. And I was like, let's talk about expectations. And we had a conversation. I was like, well, Florida, I was like, what you saw in DJ Lagway, it gives Florida hope. And just to looking at just how the identity of Florida has changed since the Urban Meyers and the Dan Mullins and even the Jim McElwain eras of, I throw Will Muschamp up there, but it was kind of short-lived. But just the expectation now of, okay, they made it through the mountain of a schedule that was last year with so much uncertainty that now this season you're looking at it as, okay, yeah, we've knocked off the Ole Misses of the world's last year that was fighting for playoff contention. Knocked off LSU. The only thing is you played them at home. Now this year you got to go on the road. But again, there's no telling where Ole Miss is going to be now with Jackson Dart and all those guys on the offensive side going, and even on the defensive side too. It's okay. Was kind of to Conrad's point about Georgia saying, if you were going to get Alabama, it had to be last year. Now, if you're Ole Miss, the best chance that you had of making the playoffs maybe was last season, and now you're going into it. Austin Simmons did come into that Georgia game and light it up for a drive. But how much do you truly put on Lane Kiffin just going? Is it going to go back to the just let's just outscore him and see what happens? Or do you still have that focal point on the defensive side of if we make a few stops, it could, but you can't have those losses to the LSUs, Kentuckys, and Floridas of the world.
2 of their first 4 games are on the road. At LSU and at Miami, back to back. You hadn't even hit October yet. Then when you get into November, by the way, the back half of your season, you've got Georgia at Kentucky at Ole Miss.
Yeah.
So even if you can find a way to not stumble at any point, oh, by the way, in October, Texas and at Texas A&M in consecutive weeks. And then you round out the season with Florida State, which, I mean, they shouldn't be worse.
Exactly.
So they should at least be improved. So they should, in theory, give you a fight.
Right.
So it's going to be tough for Florida. I think they're a better team, but it's going to be tough for them to improve record-wise.
Mm-hmm. And again, a lot of it just goes on DJ Lagway's shoulders because of the fact that we had question marks of even with Graham Mertz at the quarterback position. It was okay. Florida's not as bad as we kind of thought they were because of Graham Mertz when you look at some of his numbers. But then we saw DJ Lagway, and it's okay. There's some heat coming out of there. Like we can see the talent because he was competitive against Tennessee. Again, if he doesn't go down against Georgia, I truly believe Florida wins that ball game. And it's okay now. The expectation, like they're not creeping up on anybody anymore. It's no, we got to give Florida their flowers. But then you look at the schedule and everything else in the SEC. Again, there's just so many question marks. And like to your point, they may be better as a unit, but their record may actually be worse because of now those teams that you beat at home. You're going on the road, and you know had they matched up with Texas A&M, let's say instead of what was it, week 2, week 3. Say if they would have gotten them in week 7, 8, we'd have a different conversation and different outlook about these teams. But I think for Florida, it's okay. Now there are real expectations, and nobody's saying that you got to be in the playoffs, but there has to be improvement. There just has to be improvement. But you know, before we went to break last segment, we were discussing Conrad and how he's starting to feel about this Oklahoma unit. So realistically, with everything that happened last season for Oklahoma with injuries and now the transfer portal and things and what they've done this spring, what do you think is the floor and the ceiling for Oklahoma going into this fall?
Yeah. So, and I'm looking at their schedule right now. They certainly don't have an easy schedule. And I think that's where for Oklahoma, you're going to have a lot of opportunities to win some marquee games. And even if, instead of going 6-6, you're only 8-4, I think depending on who you could beat, we could view that as a significant improvement, even though you're still only sitting there at 8-4. But I mean, I would say, I think the floor for me with Oklahoma is still probably around, honestly, the floor is probably 5-7 or 6-6 because of how difficult the schedule is. So you have Illinois State to open up. You have Temple. You have Kent State. Those are going to be wins right there. Your non-conference game is Michigan, which is going to be interesting. But you're getting Michigan early on in the second week of the season where, we don't know how good Bryce Underwood's going to be, right? But having to host or having Bryce Underwood go on the road to a place like Norman, Oklahoma that early on in his tenure, I would probably lean Oklahoma in that game right now. But you do have the Auburn game, I think is a very, very interesting matchup. That game's in Norman as well. We all remember how that game ended up last year. And that's a big statement win for both of these teams, right? And that could be the game that we go back and look at and we go, okay, well, whoever won this game, you saw how their season maybe went the way we expected, and the loser maybe didn't quite meet the expectations that we had for them. But you've got Texas. That's going to be tough on the road. South Carolina on the road. You have Ole Miss at home. You go on the road to Tennessee. That should be a win now without Nico. I would think that would be a win. Missouri, we don't really know what to make of them, but I think that's a game you should be able to win at home. But it comes down to what are you going to do with the LSUs, the Alabamas, the Ole Miss, Texas and South Carolina. Those are 5 games right there where, and I'd throw Auburn in there as well, right? That's 6 games. So if you go 3-3 in those games, you should be 9-3, right? And that would be a spectacular season with what their schedule is. But that's why I look at those 6 games and I go, okay, yeah, if you're telling me Oklahoma's going to go 2-4, because I think they're good enough to win a couple of those games, that's where you get your 8-4. And again, I think based on who you beat, you would say, man, Oklahoma made some strides in year 2 in the SEC. I'm not expecting them to make the playoff or be in the conversation the final week for a playoff spot. Maybe they will be, but I just look at Oklahoma and I go, can you get back to a point where you're competitive and you're a team that people don't want to play in the SEC? Because we all know the history of Oklahoma. I have no doubt that Oklahoma will get back and will be one of the better teams in the SEC in the near future. But it's just for right now, based on what you saw last year, can you get the guys healthy? I think you upgraded at quarterback. You brought in a new offensive coordinator. I think defensively, what you have with Venables, you're still very solid there. So yeah, I think for me, my floor for Oklahoma would be 6-6. My ceiling would be 9-3. But realistically, right now, I'm looking at them as like an 8-4
Okay.
kind of team.
I say we keep the conversation going just kind of the rest of the show. Since we've started with Auburn, Alabama, we've done Oklahoma, let's just take a look at the SEC as a whole as we continue here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. We'll take a look at some SEC teams and just get the floor and ceiling from the guys. 205-834-9450, hear from you as well. Keep it locked right here on Mac and Cube in the morning. $8:52 here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Damian, Conrad, and John here with you. Talking about the ceiling and floor for some SEC teams. Went Auburn, Alabama. Started off with Paul Finebaum. And Paul believes Alabama should still be in the conversation for national title picture. Auburn, just improvements all around. 8-4, 9-3 realistically. Took a look at Oklahoma. And I agree with you, Conrad. I think if you're 8-4, 9-3, kind of flirting with that, I think for Oklahoma, you got to feel pretty good in year two of the SEC, and kind of the floor for them, 6-6. And again, it could just be that, injuries could happen. Maybe Mateer doesn't materialize into what he could be with his time in Washington State. There's just a lot of variables. And again, you kind of look at the schedule. There's just games that are just toss-ups that you didn't have when you were in the Big 12. It was just kind of one of those automatic, we're going to punch that one as a win and kind of keep it moving.
I think Oklahoma is also a team where and again, I know people don't like hearing this, and it doesn't mean anything. You don't get a banner for it. But Oklahoma could have the same record this year, and we could still look at them and go, that's a significantly better football team than the one the year before.
Yeah.
I think that's a possibility as well. I know that's like the ultimate consolation prize, and we're not in the business of consolation prizes, but they have more talent at their disposal this year than they did last year. There's no excuse.
Absolutely. Let's kind of look at another SEC team, and somebody that's Oklahoma's biggest rival. How about the Texas Longhorns? Of course, now with Arch Manning taking over the helm, you lose a few pieces around him, and it's kind of just, has Texas reached that point where they just, instead of rebuilding, they just reload? And again, a team that made the first year in the SEC, made it to the SEC title game, made it to the college football playoff, ended up losing to the eventual national champions in Ohio State. But, if you were to kind of look at what Texas is bringing back and just kind of the outlook of the SEC, what would be your, I guess, floor ceiling for the Texas Longhorns?
Yeah, I think for them, floor is probably 9-3. And a lot of that has to do with your first game of the season is against Ohio State. And that's, that's going to be maybe the best game of the season, or certainly right up there with, the Alabama, Georgia and matchups of that caliber. So I think that one, and right now, just on paper, to be honest, I would probably take Ohio State in that matchup over Texas. You do have to go to Florida, and that's another one where based on, you could see where that would be a loss if Florida is as advertised and DJ Lagway is really that dude. But for right now, I would give that one to Texas. The Oklahoma game, again, you kind of throw everything out the window for that one, right? Because it's a rivalry game. And we've seen some crazy stuff there. You have to go to Georgia. And based on what we saw last year, I probably would lean Georgia in that one as well. And then you have Texas A&M. I'm not, again, you have Kentucky, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Arkansas. You should win those games, right? I'm not worried about those games if you're Texas. So I look at Ohio State and Georgia. Those are definitely tricky ones. And then I think the Florida game, because it's on the road, would be another one I would throw in there. So my floor would be 9-3 for Texas. And I think the ceiling for them is 11-1, whether that's a loss at Georgia or to Ohio State in that first game. But if Arch Manning is the real deal and looks like he's going to be a first-round pick next year at quarterback, I think Texas, rightfully so, should probably be viewed as the favorite in the SEC going into the year. So yeah, I'd go floor 9-3, ceiling 11-1.
It's fair. And again, a lot of it deals with just Arch Manning. It's, again, you don't want to put too much pressure on him, but you're quarterback in the SEC, so you're going to get it.
Well, and I think he's going to be good, but is he going to be elite? That's the question.
Like, could he put up Quinn Ewers numbers and Texas still find themselves in the CFP? I think that's what it is. It's okay. This is the kind of the bare minimum that will get you there. Can you do this at least?
And I think if you're Texas, you're hoping he can do more for you than Quinn Ewers, because that's when you start talking about national championship.
Absolutely. We'll keep the conversation going on the other side. SEC floor and ceilings. Keep it locked. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Hour number 3 here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order, John Saber here with you, filling in for the guys on this Monday morning. Do have to discuss a little bit of the UFL as well, as the Birmingham Stallions end up falling this weekend to the Memphis Showboats, the worst team in the league.
Wow, so you take your shirt off somewhere else and look what happens.
No, I definitely kept it on down there in New Orleans, man. It actually started raining there Saturday too, and it was kind of. But I will say this: the rain does not stop the party.
Were you in New Orleans when Auburn had the kick six against Alabama in 2013?
No.
Okay, I just didn't know if there was a connection between you being in New Orleans and kick sixes in the state of Alabama.
Yeah, and then it's on the receiving end for the Birmingham Stallions. And again, they lost 24-20 to the Memphis Showboats. And
hey, first overtime game ever in UFL history. History was made at Protective Stadium on Friday.
It was indeed.
You missed it.
Yeah, I was upset. I was taking a peek at it on the way down, and like, listen, Cook is good quarterback. We got to find some consistency offensively, and our defense have got to stop with the mental errors. Like, it's one thing to get beat deep on a pass play, but when you're not even in phase, I don't know if there was just like a miscommunication in coverage. But Memphis has been trying to figure out their offense all season long, and they look like they couldn't be stopped for the first 3 quarters of the game, and then we finally get to overtime. I'm thinking, okay. This is where Birmingham, like, if you've gotten
you score at the last minute, you have the momentum.
Yes.
Let's win this thing and get out of here.
And we fell short. But we do get them back. We do get a chance to pack Protective, not on a Friday night, but a Sunday afternoon against the San Antonio Brahmas. We had their head coach, Peyton Party, on last week, and he told us that he believed that Kalen Mond had his best football ahead of him. And all San Antonio did was go out there and get beat by the Houston Roughnecks, 24-3, and Kellen Mond was benched. It was the best hate watch. It was the best hate watch I've seen. I was chomping at the bit.
Oh, I'm sure.
I could not. Oh my gosh! And let me see him Sunday.
I'm sure.
Let me see him Sunday.
I know.
It's on site.
I know you're looking forward to that. Johnny texted in. He brings this up. I'm glad he brought this up from the end of the Stallions game. If you missed it, because there was a situation in overtime where so you have, I think it's called a super challenge is the correct term. But essentially you get it in overtime and you can challenge like penalties. So for example, Birmingham was trying to challenge that there was a holding call against one of their defensive linemen. So they go to the monitor, but the problem was Skip Holtz says, I want you to check for holding on number 96, I believe it was. And in reality, the player was actually number 90. So while there was a holding call and it should have been called on the challenge, Coach Holtz relayed the wrong jersey number into the officials. And so at that point, they can't do anything because they're looking at what the coach is calling for. And so it was just a miscommunication between Coach Holtz and I guess whoever else on the staff was telling him, hey, this is what we're challenging. This is the number. And again, I can understand where you're watching the replay. The numbers are kind of crumpled up. You could see where a 90 would be a 96. But yes, Birmingham should have won that challenge, and that would have potentially changed the outcome of the game. But Skip Holtz relayed the wrong jersey number to the officials, and so the challenge was unsuccessful. And then, the Showboats won 24-20. So, I appreciate you bringing that up, Johnny. But that is what happened. It was just from my perspective, it was an unfortunate miscommunication between Coach Holtz and the officials, and that's why that didn't work out.
But that all changes, man. Hey, you got to listen. Now we're fighting for playoffs at this point. You're starting to hit the backstretch of the season, and we welcome in the San Antonio Brahmas Sunday at 3 p.m. Got to get this one.
Yep.
Got to get this one. And again, San Antonio, for as much change has happened for that program, that organization, since the season has started, they find themselves, at the bottom of the barrel, but you can't afford to lose games like that against the Memphis Showboats, and you don't want to follow that up with the San Antonio Brahmas, no matter who's at quarterback.
No, absolutely not. And I think, that's probably one of the more concerning things as much as, we were talking about Case Cookus and what he did. And I mean, he didn't have a terrible night necessarily, but again, this is your third string quarterback, and watching the offense, at least for me, I guess on the one hand, it didn't look significantly worse than what you had, but that's also the concern, right? As you're now on your third string quarterback and the offense looks very similar. Right. So going to need to be more consistent there. Hopefully Corral and Magoo are able to get healthy and get back
soon.
at it sooner rather than later, because granted, neither of them maybe gave you the most confidence in the world, but we've seen them do it before, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that stability and being 100% healthy is what we need. But like you said, Damien, pack out protective on Sunday afternoon and hopefully get back to the winning ways. But Birmingham now 4-2 on the season.
Yeah, listen, it's just a little adversity in the regular season. Just stay strong. And
We're just not used to it.
At all. At all.
This is good. It builds character.
It does.
And the Stallions are going to be battle tested for the postseason, right?
I'm with you.
This is like what we're talking about in basketball, right? With Alabama and Auburn building up those tough non-conference schedules. Maybe you're going to lose some, right? You're going to lose to Duke early on. It is what it is. You're going to lose, early on some of these non-conference games, but it's getting you ready for the postseason. That's what it's all about.
I wouldn't necessarily say this is a marathon, not a sprint. This is more like an open 400. It's more of a 400. Like we gotta pick those knees, and we gotta pick those knees up now. Like it's time to dig on that back stretch. But yeah, we're still giddy up nonetheless. But transitioning to the college football side of things, we were talking SEC ceiling and floors, talking about Auburn, Alabama, Oklahoma, and also Texas. Now let's kind of look at the state of Mississippi and Ole Miss, a team that going into this point last year, it was almost like unless Ole Miss throws up on themselves, they're going to be in the college football playoff. Like it was just, this is what the 12-team expansion was going to benefit teams like Ole Miss that are they've been there. Like they've just been nipping at the bit and they're there now. And then the season starts and then the loss to Kentucky happens and it's, wait a minute. I thought this was the reason why we're not supposed, this was not supposed to happen. This was just unforeseen circumstances. The Kentucky was at no point better than you in the regular season. There was no point. But you lose that game. And it's like, okay, you got that loss out the way. You should be good the rest of the way. Then you go to Baton Rouge and you lose to LSU. And it's, okay, Lane, you have to win out. Like, you have to win out from this point forward. And then they take a trip to the Swamp and lose. And it's, okay, well, if this was the best team that Ole Miss has had and you blew it, this season is going to be completely different because there's not a returning Trey Harris, Jordan Watkins, those pieces on the defensive side. And then now Jackson Dart is gone. And that insert Austin Simmons, which we saw him for a drive against Georgia. And it's, okay, this should be fine.
But it was one drive.
Yeah, exactly. And now that he's the guy, Ole Miss to me, the ceiling should still be high, but the floor, it could, if it doesn't work out, it could be 7-5 fighting for 8-4.
Yeah, no, I do think that the floor for Ole Miss is a little bit lower than maybe it has been the last couple of years. Because I was going to say, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt in the sense that I think their floor is still 8-4 because they do have one of the more manageable schedules. You do have LSU, you go to Georgia and Oklahoma, you have South Carolina and Florida, right? Those are the 5 games. The other games on the schedule, I know what happened against Kentucky, and the other games should not be a problem for you. Georgia State, Kentucky, Arkansas, Tulane, Washington State, Citadel, Mississippi State. Those games should not be problematic for you. So I look at those 5 games that I just mentioned in SEC play, and I could easily see Ole Miss losing 4 of those games. You could even convince me potentially that they lose all 5 of those games because those are going to be tough. And we saw them lose to LSU and Florida last year, right? And I think that's the biggest thing. What you mentioned with Ole Miss is last year was truly if not last year, then why would we ever believe that this year was going to be any different, right? Because last year set up so well for you with all the returning talent you had and the way your schedule played out in the SEC, especially when, if you in hindsight went back and told Ole Miss fans that you bullied Georgia in your regular season matchup last year, you would have thought that y'all were probably playing for a national championship and you didn't even make the playoff. So on one hand, we have now seen Ole Miss be able to win a game that we hadn't in the past, right? That was easily the biggest win that Lane Kiffin's had at Ole Miss was beating Georgia last year. But now it's, can you do it again? And my concern with them is LSU, excuse me, I think LSU's better than they were last year. They got a lot of guys coming in through the portal, plus another year of Garrett Nussmeier to hopefully, ease out some of those interception problems that he had last year. But I think LSU's better. Georgia, okay, that one's kind of up in arms, but you have to go and play that game on the road now this year. We've already talked about Oklahoma. We think they're going to be better. South Carolina is a very interesting one because even if they're just as good as they were last year, now granted, we saw Ole Miss dominate them last year, and that was one of their better wins of the season. but we all expect South Carolina to be in the playoff mix, and then Florida, right? We saw Florida beat them last year, and we're expecting Florida to be better. So it's very tricky to me because I want to have faith in Austin Simmons, and I do think just by the fact of it's the next Lane Kiffin quarterback, he's going to be good.
Right.
It's just a question of how good. So for me right now, I would say the floor for me is probably 8-4, and I think the ceiling is 10-2 because I do think you're still going to, you're going to lose probably on the road at Georgia or to an LSU team that's kind of had your number the last couple of years. It's difficult, as we know, week in and week out in the SEC, even when you have a more favorable schedule. So without knowing more about Austin Simmons and seeing him for more than a drive as impressive as it was, I would probably go 8-4, 10-2 for Ole Miss. And right now I would say they're about a 9-3 team like they were last year.
Yeah. And speaking of the LSU Tigers, they'll be next on the list because I think that for LSU, and to your point, Garrett Nussmeier's returning, and the value of what you got in the transfer portal, on top of if your defense even takes a half a step up, this team could really be dangerous because they could score with the best of them. It's just defensively, you couldn't buy a stop. You just can't. At what point do we see the full Harold Perkins Jr. again? Like, when do we see him at full tilt again? Because of everything we saw freshman year, it's, okay, well, they got a dude. But now again, you got 10 other guys that have to make a stop as well. And also, are they going to make an effort to run the football? Because I understand you want Garrett Nussmeier to go out there, and if you want to air raid this thing up, cool. But they have to keep people honest running the football. And you're not going to have a cakewalk to start the season. You got to go. You got Clemson, a team that just played for a college football playoff. And if everything goes right for Clemson, Cade Klubnik is probably one of the better players coming back in college football, if not the best quarterback returning. If he looks across that defense and it looks any kind of resemblance like it was last year, that game may be 55-40 come games in. But also, Garrett Nussmeier can't turn the ball over in key situations as well to help the other team out. I think for LSU, it's, again, if that defense takes just one notch up, this team could be in the college football playoff and actually be a real contender to win it all. But also, if it, quote unquote, falls, it could be looking on 8-4, 9-3.
Yeah, no, and that's where I'm. Again, I think their floor is probably 8-4 as well. The Clemson game is going to tell us a lot because, LSU hasn't, it feels like forever since they won a season opener, right? Because you go back with
again.
Yeah, and so with USC last year and a team that ended up not being very good, Florida State 2 years ago, that team ended up being pretty good, and then Florida State the year before that they were an all right team, but clearly. I think at least 2 of the last 3 years you should have won. You should have beaten USC, and you shouldn't have lost that first year where you missed the extra point. To lose to Florida State there. And now Clemson's going to be a top 5 team going into the season. I fully expect that. And a lot of people are going to be riding the Clemson hype train. And if you win this game, I think that sets a different precedent or a different set of expectations upon this season for LSU. But again, looking at what they have in the SEC, you have Florida. You have to go on the road to Ole Miss. You have to go on the road to Alabama. You have to go on the road to Oklahoma. I think, again, this is if you win that first game against Clemson, I think at that point your ceiling or your floor is 9-3. Because if you get past that one, okay, you lose to Alabama, you lose to Ole Miss, you lose to Oklahoma on the road. Maybe you take one of those out, you lose to a South Carolina team that should have beaten you last year but got screwed by the officiating. You could see where, okay, 9-3 is realistic for them. But I do think for LSU, especially if you win that Clemson game, you're kind of looking at maybe that Alabama game. Is that the game you need to win to get to 10-2 and be in the college football playoff? And we had that discussion last year as well. I just think so much of what you make of LSU depends on that first game of the season because you're clearly not out of things at that point. But based on what we saw from the committee this year, right, having 3 losses, it's going to be very difficult, if even possible at all, to get in the playoff. You start off 0-1. You're then telling me the rest of the way you can only lose 1 game to Ole Miss, South Carolina, A&M, Alabama, Oklahoma, Florida. Like that gets tricky there. And the pressure that's on you, especially if you drop one of those games. Let's say you lose to Ole Miss in September. You have 2 losses before you get to the month of October, and you have to win out the rest of the way. What does that do to the mental psyche of your football team? So Yeah, I mean, I'm probably going 8-4 floor, 10-2 ceiling for LSU. I think college football playoff is certainly in reach for them, but beating Alabama and beating Clemson, I think those are going to be the two biggest obstacles for them to overcome. And can you split? That would be my thing for LSU. Can you split on the road at Alabama and on the road to start the year with Clemson?
Absolutely. 205-834-9450. You can weigh in as well. Your text message, your call is always welcome here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. We'll keep going. SEC floor and ceiling across the conference. We'll keep the conversation on the other side. Keep it locked right here on Jocks 94.5. 9:20 here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Damian, Conrad, and John here with you, discussing the floor and ceilings for the SEC. We talked about Auburn, Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas, LSU. Now let's kind of look at some teams that could potentially find themselves in the college football playoff again. Start with the Georgia Bulldogs. And of course, Carson Beck's gone. You lose, I think it might be addition by subtraction with that receiver room. You lose ETN out the backfield. Branson Robinson hits the transfer portal. Is this just a reload situation for Georgia? Have they reached this point of, hey, yeah, we had some slip-ups last year. We still won the SEC. They are the SEC champions. But now we saw Gunnar Stockton play against Notre Dame. Wasn't terrible. But again, first start, and the first start you have is in the college football playoff. So now you return him. Defensively, you lose some guys. Or is it, again, has Kirby Smart just reached this point as far as recruiting and, the transfer portal and things of just, hey, next man up mentality? I think when you look at Georgia, I have my reservations. I think the ceiling is still high because, again, they are the reigning SEC champions. But I think it's more of a smaller gap in between them being 9-3, 10-2 at the absolute best. Because again, I have my reservations of, I don't think it's just plug and play. Because again, I saw the Ole Miss game where, again, I've never thought that I would utter the words that Ole Miss was more physical. But then they made Texas look, they had Quinn Ewers absolutely shook out there. And then when Arch Manning came in, he looked like, oh my gosh, like this is not the Mississippi States. This is not the Louisiana Monroes of the world. So I tend to lean a little more pessimistic than I do optimistic for Georgia going into the fall. I still think that their ceiling is 10-2, 11-1, but I think their floor is kind of in that 8-4 if it doesn't go right, 9-3 if they get caught sleepwalking again.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing with Georgia is their floor is just lower than maybe it's been in about 5 years. And I think that's where maybe some of the concern starts to creep in because, I do certainly have questions at a number of spots on their roster. But I think what we're seeing with Georgia now is just the reality of college football. And it's what we've seen with Alabama the last couple of years as well is you're still able to reload and be competitive on a year in and year out basis, but you aren't stacked with the wealth of talent from a depth perspective because of the portal that you were, 7-8 years ago, to where you truly were just reloading with 5-star talent year in and year out. And I think for Florida or for Georgia, you're now seeing like last year with the wide receivers, right? It was the same thing that happened with Alabama a couple years ago, where you got out of this era where you had Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs and Jalen Waddle and all of these incredible talents, and a lot of them, like 3 or 4 of them at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to a point where you didn't have those guys anymore. And you brought in a Jameson Williams and he did great things, but you had more of a, an average receiving core with your Jermaine Burtons of the world and your John Mechie's of the, like guys that are good players, but they're not the game-breaking first-round pick guys that you had for so many years. And now for Georgia, without the Ladd McConkeys, without the Brock Bowers of the world, I think last year you started to see, okay, this is what Georgia can look like while they have good players, but they don't have the best of the best talent at every single position anymore. And I think, for Georgia going into this year, so much of it does come down to Gunnar Stockton and what he develops into. I do think if we're looking at the optimistic side, you can look at, well, what does the Georgia offense look like with a mobile quarterback? Because we haven't really seen that a whole lot in the Kirby Smart era. It makes you wonder, maybe is this what Georgia would have looked like with the Justin Fields type guy at quarterback that we never really got to see? So the upside is certainly there. The optimism or reason for optimism is certainly there, but you also don't have a very easy schedule if you're Georgia because you have Alabama early on. You have to go to Jordan-Hare and play Auburn. You have Ole Miss, you have Florida, you have Texas. Heck, you have Georgia Tech. We saw what happened last year in that game, right? And I think we all expect Georgia Tech could be even better this year, carrying that momentum forward. So I just think for Georgia, well, yes, I think I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt in a lot of matchups. Do I think they're going to go to Jordan-Hare and beat Auburn? I do. But am I going to be shocked if Auburn beats them this year? No, I don't. I think this is the first year that you could realistically say something like that. We saw Ole Miss. You brought up what happened last year with how they got bullied. And I think that's the other thing for Georgia is we just saw them. They had weaknesses last year that we haven't seen, and they looked beatable for teams that are not named Alabama, essentially, for the first time in a long time. And I think that carries over a little bit this year. I still think they're going to be very, very good. But I'm with you. I think the ceiling for them is 8-4. I think realistically, I expect them to go 10-2. I expect them to be back in the playoff until proven otherwise.
Yeah.
Because it is Georgia. It is Kirby Smart. They have a ton of talent. And I do think that Gunnar Stockton, I mean, hey, he beat Texas in the SEC championship, right? Like, we've seen him win a big time game already. Now, I know you could probably knock Texas for not doing anything offensively in that game. But still, yeah, I think Georgia's in a good spot. They have more question marks than normal, but until proven otherwise, I'm still going to rock with Georgia to be a playoff team. And I think that, their ceiling is 10-2, 11-1, like you were saying. Okay.
Now we're on the team that made it to the college football playoff and will look drastically different this fall. That'd be the Tennessee Volunteers. And literally in a span of 15 or so days, this whole team is going to look different because you at least had, your quarterback, give or take, that was it got you there. Like, he played in it. But now he's gone to UCLA, and you in essentially a quarterback swap. You lose Dylan Sampson. You lose James Pierce. You lose Dante Thornton, Brew McCoy, all those guys. Squirrel White hits the transfer portal. Listen, I am a Heupel disciple, but he is going to have to really coach his tail off this fall. And I think the floor could really be like,
I think it's 6-6.
That's what I was about to say, fighting to be 500.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to require you to, put everything together because, again, the best defense that you had last year, of all things, the offense took a step back.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it you can put on Nico, and a lot of it was, hey, they had to change their identity because of the inconsistency you got at quarterback. I think the best thing that you had going for you last year, Dylan Sampson was able to carry that thing 30 times a game.
Yep, and he's gone.
And I'm not an offensive line guru. I don't really know, like what they're returning up front. But, the ceiling for them and with everything that's happened, I think if you go 8-4, 9-3, and you may pull off an upset against a team that's going to the CFP, but as far as them making it back, I think their chances are they're small.
Yeah, no, I don't think that if you're a Tennessee fan, I know from a personal standpoint, right, you're going to hold on to the best case scenario for your team, but I don't think that the college football playoff is not realistic, in my opinion, right now. I think 9-3 is the ceiling. And that to me is everything goes. You're getting the most out of Joey Aguilar that you can in that offense. And I think for them, I really do think the floor is 6-6 because I could legitimately see them. You could see them losing the first game to Syracuse. Like, Syracuse has turned into a good program, and now it's kind of funny that they have Angeli, the quarterback from Notre Dame that we thought was going to Tennessee. But you could lose that game to Syracuse, but you have Georgia. You have to play an Arkansas team that, we've talked a lot about. I know you're very high on Taylon Green, but this is a team that beat you last year with Nico. So you can't disrespect that matchup. You have to go to Bryant-Denny and take on Alabama, which while you have found more success against Alabama, winning 2 of the last 3, you haven't done it in Bryant-Denny yet. So I don't know if you're expecting that to happen with Aguilar. You do have Oklahoma, who we expect to be better. You have to go to Florida, who we expect to be better. And you have to play Vanderbilt at the end of the year, who, as we all know, is significantly better than they were a couple of years ago. So, yeah, I could see this going off the rails, and we're talking about a Tennessee team that's maybe happy to be 7-5 at the end of the year, but I really do think 6-6 is the floor. And I think 9-3, if Tennessee goes 9-3 with Aguilar as quarterback, Josh Heupel should win SEC Coach of the Year, and you have to feel good because that you're keeping the momentum going. As much as you could, given the circumstance, if you're Josh Heupel and that coaching staff, if you find a way to win 9 games this year.
Yeah, because you're doing it with no superstars.
Absolutely.
Like you're basically just banking on the system working. And if they have to go back to averaging 55 points a game, again, like you kind of, I look at this Tennessee team, especially this fall, to your point, if Josh Heupel finds 8-9 wins, you got to feel ecstatic because it's going to be difficult. And you have to be realistic of, all right, man, as much as we hate Nico and he's gone, he was probably the only thing that we could at least count on of he's at least returning. But now that he's gone, it's all right, Josh, here we go. And he's won everywhere he's gone. He's had to build it up. but I just think that collectively it's going to be tough sledding. But we continue on the other side. We'll take a look at a team that caught up some teams by surprise last season. Where do we think the South Carolina Gamecocks look as far as their ceiling and floor going into this fall of 2025? 205-834-9450. You can always join the conversation as well. Keep it locked right here on Jocks 94.5. .935 here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Damian Mitchell, alongside Con Van Order and John Saber. Here with you for a few more moments. He's passed off three-man front at the top of the hour. Pat Landrum and Molly holding things down. And we're talking the floor and ceilings for some teams in the SEC. And again, it's just post-spring, how you're feeling going into the fall. And we the only real team that we have a lot of question marks about is just Tennessee that we talked about in the last segment, and kind of looking at a team that really snuck up on some people last season when it did click, and that's the South Carolina Gamecocks. And again, the jury was still out on Lenora Sellers, coming into the season. How was it going to work? Little did we know that Shane Beamer had probably the best kept secret at quarterback position with what Lenora Sellers was able to do. You had that soul crushing loss against LSU early on. You take Alabama essentially to the last play of the football game, but Texas A&M came in with college football playoff expectations on the line. You pretty much, all Texas A&M had to do was win out, and they were about to find themselves in the SEC title game, and you knocked them off. You beat the brakes off Oklahoma, and now it's okay. Lenora Sellers, he's a robot. I didn't realize how athletic he was, and I didn't process if South Carolina just had a few more pieces, they would have been a tough out if they would have gotten a chance to play in the college football playoff. But now you're no longer sneaking up on anybody. It's big dog, welcome to the table. And I think for Shane Beamer and what he's built there in South Carolina, they've always been competitive, even when they didn't have just bona fide superstars. But I think you got one in Lenora Sellers. And if he takes another step up, South Carolina could be one of those teams we look at the end of the season of, I don't want to see them come November, December.
No, I think South Carolina is super intriguing. And part of it, is it's hard to figure out, what do you do now that you have a little bit of a target on your back, right? And that's kind of the big question for South Carolina, because we know, you have an elite quarterback. You have arguably the best returning defensive player in the league in Dylan Stewart. And you spent a lot of money to bring those guys back. You got a young receiver in Nick Harbor, who I think is somebody that will be somewhat of a household name in the SEC later on this year. You've got pieces around it. You're going to have to replace, what Rocket Sanders did in the backfield for you, as he had a fantastic season for them last year. But you have the foundational pieces there, right? And so now, going into a year, like you're saying, with expectations, you're not going to catch anybody off guard. Are you able to capitalize on that? Because yes, there's the part of me that thinks, okay, surely Lenora Sellers is only going to continue to get better. There are already people talking about him potentially being the number one quarterback prospect in next year's draft. And I think that's reasonable, but you can also look at it as, okay, well, now the tape's out on a lot of these guys. How do you handle that now going into a season where the rest of the SEC has had an entire offseason to game plan around you, right? And I think for South Carolina, it's just, can you carry over some of the impressive statement wins you had last year, like beating Texas A&M the way that you did? Can you do that again this year? Can you beat up on Oklahoma again this year, even though they're going to be a little bit better? Can you pull out a win over an LSU team that you should have beaten last year? And if, that one play, that one pick six doesn't get called back because of an officiating error, in my opinion, you're in the college football playoff, right? Are those the kinds of plays that will go your way this year? We saw how close they got against Alabama. That game's at home this year. Now, is that a game that you're circling potentially for Alabama to lose? You do have to go to Ole Miss, and you have Clemson, and a Clemson team that you saw them knock off last year, but we think Clemson's going to be better. Again, for me with South Carolina, I think they're going to be good. I think they're going to be just about as good as they were last year. I do not have them in the playoff right now. I think they're about a 9-3 team again, like they were last year, because I do think that it is going to be more difficult for them this year, because you're not going to catch anybody off guard. But I think what Shane Beamer has built there, and again, the foundation with the guys like Lenora Sellers and Dylan Stewart and Harbor and some of those other guys, is good enough to, I think, hold steady with what you had last year. It's just, can you take that next step? And that's where I look at Lenora Sellers. Can you really separate yourself from having a very nice freshman season and kind of coming on the scene and having a breakout season, to now where we're talking about you potentially being in New York for a Heisman? I think that's where, if you're South Carolina, that's where you look at, if that happens, maybe we're talking college football playoff. But for me right now, I would still go 9-3. I think the floor for them, though, realistically, is probably 7-5, because you could see where you're due for a regression based on last year. But I think ceiling for them is probably 10-2. And I would have them though more as like a 9-3, just like last year. I think they're going to be very good again.
I got you. Continuing the conversation around the
quickly,
SEC.
I want to butt in here. We do have some breaking news
Talk to me.
from the basketball world though. But Chad Baker-Mazara has officially decided where he is going to continue his college basketball career. So this was announced a couple of minutes ago, but Auburn transfer Chad Baker-Mazara is transferring to USC. So he's going to go play for Eric Musselman out in Los Angeles. And I imagine a hefty payday coming along with that. I will say that is not where I expected him to end up. I was still hoping for Arkansas. I thought that would have been pretty fun.
Hey.
But Chad Baker-Mazara heading to Southern California where he will be a USC Trojan.
Okay. USC.
An emotional coach, an emotional player.
Yeah. Big Ten now. Okay.
Well, I assume, if you're him, you're going there with the expectation that you're probably going to be the go-to scorer and have an opportunity to, maybe you average 18 points a game this upcoming season, and that helps your draft stock. Even though, again, as an NBA player going into the draft at 26 years old,
Luka's 26.
Luka is the same age as him. Yep, I think SGA is about the same age as him. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, yeah. So,
but that's your breaking news. Chad Baker-Mazara, he is decided he is going to take his talents to Southern Cal, USC.
All right. I just don't know how to feel about that.
I just want to know the money situation.
Right. Like is it worth it? You got all those taxes out there in California. Seems like another.
You're not going to, unless
pay cut.
Unless USC has, some secret weapon or, some trick up their sleeve. I don't think you're going to be on a team that's going to be competing for a Final Four. You'll probably be happy to make it to the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would think money's involved. But again, just going back to the Auburn situation where we found out that he had signed a deal with Auburn.
Right.
And then he backs out of it because he finds out he can get more money somewhere else probably. And now, I'm just interested to know what that dollar amount's going to be like at USC because I have to imagine it'd be substantial.
Yeah. But also I think, like you said, just the taxes and he's taking a pay cut. But also, like you said, he's probably going to be the number one guy. You get a chance. You're still in a competitive conference in the Big Ten. Still, like you said, if you make it to the tournament, good. If not, sometimes the grass ain't always greener.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the grass ain't always greener. But continue the conversation on the college football side of things with the floor and ceiling for some teams in the SEC. A team I'm optimistic about, but they've been so, I'm not going to say consistently inconsistent.
Is that Arkansas?
Yeah, it's they've shown glimpses, and it's just because I love Sam Pittman. It's hard not to root for him.
Absolutely, great guy.
Like you see, there's moments where it's, oh my gosh, they can figure it all out, and then there's other games, and it's, what happened there? Like you knock off a team in Tennessee and go into the college football playoff, a team that ended up going to the college football playoff. You knocked off Auburn, which in the grand scheme of it, didn't really look that good. But then you find the losses to Texas A&M and things like that, where it's when will they be able to just figure it all out? Because I do think Taylor Green is a game changer at quarterback. Like I think just the athletic ability, if he is more consistent, Arkansas can be so much better. But it's almost like that until I see it consistently, it's hard to just put all your chips behind them. But they got good value because, again, they've shown that they can win those big time matchups. But it's those gut punches of, man, how did you lose this one? Like, how did this one happen? And I don't know. Like, Arkansas to me is just so puzzling because if it clicks, it clicks. Because one thing about Arkansas, they welcome the fist fight. Bobby P is back. It's just the signs are telling me that they should be better. But then there's also that, it's Arkansas. It's just what realistic expectations do we really have? I think their ceiling is probably 8-4, flirting with 9-3, but that's also like you have to pull off some upsets along the way. And then the floor is, man, it could be under 500.
Yeah, I think the floor for Arkansas is 4-8. I think their ceiling's probably 7-5. And I know that's not, a very fun reality to live in,
Yeah,
but I mean, when you just, I mean, okay, you've got Ole Miss. Well, first off, 2 of your non-conference games, you got to play Notre Dame, who just played for national
Right.
championship. Good luck. And you have to go to Memphis, which is that's a
good football team.
That's a good football program. But you also have Ole Miss. You have Tennessee, who again, okay, you look at that and go, well, we beat them last year with Nico. Maybe we can beat them again. But you have to go to Ole Miss, to Tennessee, to LSU, to Texas. You have A&M at home, Auburn at home, Missouri at home, and Mississippi State at home. I'll give you that one. But I mean, seriously, okay, Alabama, A&M, Arkansas State, Mississippi State. I'll give you those wins. I think you could make an argument they should beat Memphis, right? Going on the road, you should be able to beat Memphis.
You're 4-0.
Again, and outside of that, every other game I think is very losable on their schedule. And I mean, I don't. You're not beating Ole Miss on the road. You're not beating Notre Dame. I don't think you're beating Auburn this year, and I don't think you're beating LSU or Texas on the road. So that's 5 losses right there. Again, that's where my best case scenario for them is 7-5, and you could have a nice little season at 7-5. But I think it's much more likely that we're talking about an Arkansas team that's probably not going to a bowl game this year, and it felt like that was the saving grace for them last year, right? You got to a bowl game, you won a bowl game, you finished 7-6. That gives that gives the program confidence. Okay, we'll run it back for another year with Sam Pittman and see what we got. Can Talon Green continue to develop? And maybe he does. And maybe you do pull off an upset here or there that you don't expect. And it is an 8-4 amazing season by Arkansas standards here now. But yeah, I mean, if I had to put money on it, I don't know if Arkansas is going to a bowl game this year.
And I hate it for Sam Pittman too.
And I do too.
Yeah.
Love that guy, but
yeah.
You gotta win consistently.
Absolutely. 205-834-9450. We'll go to your text messages, your calls on the other side of the wrap up here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. 9:50 here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order, John Saber here with you for a few more moments as we get you set for three-man front coming up at the top of the hour. Been a fun Monday show. You can always get the podcast every single hour. Also, our interview with Paul Finebaum at JocksFM.com, the Jocks mobile app, wherever you get your podcast. So before we get out here, we want to make sure we get to your text messages at 205-834-9450. Conrad, we got some people weighing in on these SEC expectations in floor and ceiling.
Yes, we have our friend Lee, the Florida Gators fan. He says Florida's ceiling is 16-0 and national champions. Their floor is 15-1, where they lose in the national championship.
Hey, go Gators, man!
I like it. I like the confidence.
That because I promise you, it was very doom and gloom this time last season. Looking at that schedule.
Let's see. Doug says South Carolina's only chance to get to 9 wins is if they get heavy 3- and 4-year starters who have played a couple of years together. They recruit well and have good coaching, but 6 or 7 other SEC teams have recruited better overall talent. He says, is Lenore Sellers going to have the same up and down career of Spencer Rattler?
I lean more into Lenore Sellers being up. I think, that dude is he's a freak, man. And again, a lot of it is just,
I would say that Lenore Sellers showed me more last year than I ever saw from Spencer Rattler in college.
Yeah, like if the plays break down, I'm thinking, oh man, he's sacked, and then all of a sudden he's 40 yards down the field, and it's like, what happened? He was just in the defensive lineman's grasp. And he willed Alabama. He willed South Carolina back in that game against Alabama. You look at the big run he had against LSU, like the signs are there, man. Like he is the real deal. And if you can find a way to figure it all out, again, the biggest thing is just now dealing with the expectations of not only can we go in here and beat these teams, like you just have to do it.
No, you're spot on there. Let's see. Jody chimes in. They say Oklahoma goes 6-7 or 7-6, and there will be a coaching change this year.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, if we're back at 6-6 territory, yeah, you probably are looking at a change there with old Venables. Let's see. Ken text in. He says the worst move of the draft was Quinn Ewers leaving Texas. He could have portaled to Tennessee and made millions of dollars. He also says, based on the NFL, Clark Lee did an awesome job based on the number of players drafted from each SEC team. And they got on the board.
Yep.
They got on the board. Let's see. Tanner said, why is everybody falling on the Bama sword this morning? I don't know. I thought we were being pretty positive, honestly.
Pretty reasonable.
Now, Bama hater, he wasn't, but.
And quickly, speaking of Clark Lee and Vanderbilt, you think Vanderbilt's going bowling again this year? Like, they ain't going to sneak up on anybody. Like, last year was, okay, yeah, Diego Pavia is going to figure it all out. And now it's, hey, got to figure out to stop 2. Got to stop number 2. Like, they would still be upsets, essentially, if they beat anybody in the SEC still.
I think they'd be favored over Kentucky.
I think Kentucky stinks. Them in Missouri.
It's just... Man, I want to say yes, but you're going to have to beat Virginia Tech again in the non-conference. You're going to have to beat Kentucky. You're probably going to have to beat Tennessee or Missouri in SEC play.
Yeah.
I'll say yes.
I think they go bowling.
I think they go 6-6, yeah. I'll give it to them.
They have to not lose to Georgia State.
Well, yeah, that is true. They did lose that game last year. I forgot about that.
They get them at home this year. It's a raucous crowd.
Yep.
Alabama fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough to go to Nashville and get that victory.
Mm-hmm. Apparently it is. Let's see. We have Jamie who texted me. He says, I hope that you and Damian are both right about Alabama and their potential this year, I think. I'm an Alabama fan, so I'm always going to be probably more on the optimistic side. Feel pretty good about Alabama being better this year than they were last year.
So what you going to do when Alabama plays Oklahoma this year? You going to go down to the game in T-Town?
No.
Oh, okay.
Nope.
Never mind then.
Nope. Never going to any game where Oklahoma is a participant ever again. This is the worst game I've ever been to in my life. Let's see. Somebody chimes in. They say Tampa Bay now has the heaviest player in the league and the lightest player in the NFL. They got the defensive tackle from Florida, and then Tez Johnson is apparently the lightest player. Well, there you go. That's a good point.
Vita Vea and what's the guy from Florida? Johnson?
Something like that. He's
Man,
big.
Yeah, you put them two on the defensive line, dog.
Yeah, he's a hoss. Will chimes in. He says, I think the Falcons had the best draft this year. 2 elite SEC defenders in round 1. Got another in the 5th round. They got the Nagurski Award winner in the 3rd round and got the Biletnikoff winner, Nick Nash, as an undesignated or undrafted free agent. A++ draft there for the Falcons.
Nick Nash, he was San Jose State?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he put up big numbers.
Yeah.
Big numbers.
He ain't play nobody.
Doug chimes in. He says, great points, you guys, on Sellers in South Carolina. Appreciate the assessment. And then Robert chimes in. He says, Alabama's floor is 9-3, ceiling 11-1, second year in DeBoer system, and bringing in Ryan Grubb as OC should help.
Boom.
It should. It definitely should.
You traded away Jalen Milroe for Ryan Grove.
Yeah, we had to throw Robbie Oots in there to sweeten the pot.
That's
but
it.
You got to do what you got to do.
That's what we call value.
I'm certainly not upset with the return.
No, we appreciate Paul Finebaum joining us. We appreciate y'all as well chiming in as we filled in for the guys this morning. We appreciate y'all. It's been fun. It's been fun 3 hours. Got the extended time for Morning Jocks, and now we pass you on off to 3-man front. They are next. Keep it locked on Jocks 94.5.